Introduction to the Ascension of the Immortal Realm. www.zhaozuiyuan.com Liu Yun, a disciple of the Xianjian Gate, obtained the spatial spiritual treasure landscape map of the Immortal Emperor in the Beast Valley. The space within the landscape map can teleport anything out of thin air. The inheritance platform in the landscape painting can learn corresponding attribute techniques by activating each attribute column, the time inside the inheritance platform, regardless of how long it is inside or outside. https://www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Chapter 1. External Disciples. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Unconsciously, Liu Yun has spent a fulfilling and changing year at the Xianjian Gate. He used to be just an ordinary mischievous child, but now he has grown into an outer disciple of the Immortal Sword sect. This transformation seems to have happened just yesterday, which is deeply emotional. The disciples of the Xianjian sect can be roughly divided into three types: core disciples, inner disciples, and outer disciples. The status of core disciples is undoubtedly the highest in the Xianjian sect. They are the pride of the Xianjian sect and the hope for its future. The status of inner disciples is also relatively high, and they can receive a certain amount of spirit stones and contributions every year. However, the treatment of external disciples varies greatly. They not only lack contribution and spiritual stone rewards, but also need to maintain their daily life by completing some miscellaneous tasks. The Xianjian Gate consists of 5 peaks, namely Zhui Peak, Junyi Peak, Yunyu Peak, Ruijin Peak, and Yuni Peak. Among them, Yuni Peak is the main peak, where the core disciples reside. Inner disciples are distributed in the other 4 peaks. In addition, there are 8 courtyards, namely the Piamiao Courtyard, Xixian Courtyard, Qixian Courtyard, Rift Valley Courtyard, Suiyuan Courtyard, Chaoyang Courtyard, Dulid Courtyard, and Shuqi Courtyard. The outer disciples reside in these 8 courtyards. Liu Yun is an ordinary outer disciple of the Phantom Academy. Although his status is the lowest, he has never felt discouraged by it. His condensing qi technique has reached the first level of cultivation, although he, like other newly added disciples, is an ordinary member. However, it is noteworthy that some extremely rare disciples have already cultivated the condensing qi technique to the 3rd level within the first year of their entry, and such talents undoubtedly belong to the genius level. And those disciples who have not even cultivated the first layer of the condensing qi technique within a year will undoubtedly fall behind them by a lot. During the year, Liu Yun took over the task of carrying water, was responsible for guarding the medicine garden, and also completed some other miscellaneous tasks. Although these tasks are tedious and have low contribution, after a year of accumulation, he still achieved some contribution. The Sutra Pavilion is a secret treasure trove of the Immortal Sword sect. The various martial arts collected in it can be exchanged as long as you have enough contribution. This is like a treasure waiting for you to discover. And Liu Yun, the purpose of his trip is for this treasure. He worked hard to accumulate a year of contribution, just to be able to exchange his desired martial arts here today. He walked into the Sutra Pavilion, and the solemn and sacred atmosphere made him feel solemn in his heart. He approached the deacon and humbly asked. Disciple Liu Yun is a disciple from the outer gate of the ethereal courtyard. He has set foot here for the first time and intends to exchange his contribution for martial arts books. How can he operate it? The deacon, a mid-year foundation building cultivator wearing a blue inner disciple robe, was looking down and flipping through something. Upon hearing Liu Yun's words, he didn't even look up and said calmly. To exchange martial arts for external disciples, please turn to the left. You only need to select the one you like from the many martial arts jade slips, and then place your contribution level jade plaque on the corresponding prohibition. The contribution level in the jade plaque will be automatically deducted, and you only need to remember the martial arts jade slips. However, please note that after a stick of incense, the prohibition of the recorded martial arts jade slips will be automatically reactivated. His voice was as plain as water, as if everything was within his expectations. Lu Yun had no choice but to walk to the left on his own. There, rows of jade slips of cultivation techniques are suspended in the air, like treasures waiting to be discovered. However, when Lu Yun carefully observed, he found that his contribution could not be exchanged for any advanced martial arts. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to jot down the location of some redeemable secret scripts before continuing to search for other possibilities. The jade slips of martial arts only provide a simple introduction, but the content is restricted and cannot be accessed. At present, Lu Yun slowly began to examine. Si Xiang Gong is a body-refining technique that is simple to practice, but requires the use of spiritual herbs to continuously soak the whole body. Exchange contribution rate of 50 points. Fireball technique, this spell can condense fireballs and activate them freely. Exchange contribution rate of 30 points. Earth wall technique, this spell can form a soil wall in front of oneself to defend against the opponent's attack. Exchange contribution rate of 40 points. Control technique, this spell can control various tools. Exchange contribution rate of 60 points. Imperial weapon technique, this spell can control the flight of magical weapons. Exchange contribution rate of 70 points. Imperial sword technique, this spell can control the flying sword to escape. Exchange contribution of 120 points. Suspension spell, this spell can suspend one's body in the air, but it consumes a lot of mana. Exchange contribution rate of 60 points. Control sword technique, this spell can control flying swords against enemies. Exchange contribution of 120 points. Lu Yun has now accumulated 150 contribution points, and the basic skills he can cultivate are some of the most ordinary ones. Just like when he first arrived at the Fairy Sword sect, he obtained the free alchemy technique, condensing chi technique, which only requires 10 points of contribution to exchange here. And just now I saw many refining methods, ranging from a few hundred points of contribution to tens of thousands of points of contribution, and the effects are also very different. If there is a good chi refining technique, it will have unimaginable effects on one's future development. Unfortunately, there is no other way, and one can only practice the condensing chi technique. Lu Yun paid attention to some basic techniques related to sword cultivation, but each one required a considerable level of contribution. He could only shake his head secretly and looked disappointed at some techniques that required less contribution. The Xianjian sect mainly focuses on sword cultivation, and among the same level, sword cultivation is relatively more powerful. However, after careful consideration, Lu Yun decided to give up sword cultivation and switch to something else. There is no other reason, it's just that in the future, if you want to cultivate swordsmanship, you need to make a considerable contribution, and you're not that wealthy. After careful selection, Lu Yun decided to choose two techniques, control technique and imperial technique. After deducting the contribution from the two jade slips, his contribution was only 20 points left. He reluctantly copied the two jade slips and returned to his residence. The contribution I have accumulated through hard work over the past year has disappeared, and it seems that I still need to continue taking on some tasks and rushing around. Lu Yun gave a bitter smile, shook his head, and took out the control and imperial weapons from the storage bag. This storage bag belongs to the most common type, which is exchanged with the remaining contribution. If purchased in the local market, it will be even more expensive. The main reason is that the spiritual stones he has accumulated over the past year are only a mere 20 yuan, which is a lower grade spiritual stone that he cannot afford to buy. Lu Yun placed two jade slips of martial arts techniques on his forehead and then took them back into his storage bag. He did not choose to practice immediately because both control and imperial weapons require magical tools to control, and he did not have any magical tools. The only solution now is how to earn more contribution and spirit stones. Now think about it, there are still some mistakes in my choice. I should choose some more practical attack spells. Choosing these two techniques now is simply not useful for jade slips. After careful consideration, Liu Yun decided to first earn some contribution before discussing the matter of magical tools. After thinking about it, he is ready to get up and take on tasks to earn contribution. Tingxian Pavilion, this is the place where the Immortal Sword sect accepts missions. The tasks of external disciples are usually on the first level, while on the second level, they are issued to internal disciples. Liu Yun did not randomly choose among the many tasks, but carefully considered and chose the cleaning task. Although this task may seem simple, it only requires cleaning twice a day in the morning and evening, and can earn 200 points of contribution in a year. This is even more than the contribution he worked hard to earn last year. After taking on the cleaning task, Liu Yun arrived at the vacant land at the foot of Yunyifeng Mountain early the next morning. There is a not too wide path there, which is already covered with broken branches and fallen leaves. Liu Yun held a broom and began cleaning. He was responsible for the small road connecting Yinyi Peak to Junyi Peak. Although the road was long, Liu Yun focused on cleaning it up and completed the task in less than an hour. Liu Yun put away his broom, glanced at the corner of his eye, and saw a thin old man waving his broom to clean the remaining branches and dust on the other side of the path. That path is not within the scope of Liu Yunqing's sweep, it should be a task undertaken by a thin old man. Liu Yun wanted to leave this place, but saw the thin old man's broom fluttering lightly, creating a gust of wind and waves wherever he passed. From a distance, it gave a feeling of being calm and gentle. Liu Yun couldn't help but curiously observe and gradually immerse himself in it, forgetting himself. The thin old man seemed to feel something, and with a soft, hey, sound, he looked at Liu Yun and murmured to himself, interesting. Then he ignored it. Liu Yun gradually regained consciousness from his mysterious feeling and looked around in confusion. When he saw the thin old man, he realized what had just happened. He began to observe the thin old man carefully and found that he was in the 6th level of qi refining. He was dressed in the clothing of an outer disciple, and his thin face had a pair of kind eyes, which made people feel warm when they looked at him. The mysterious feeling just now was his technique of waving the broom, his body movements, and his method of breathing in luck. Liu Yun followed the thin old man closely as he observed. This path seems to never sweep to the end. 3 months passed in a blink of an eye, and besides completing his cleaning task, Liu Yun went to accompany the skinny old man to clean. During these 3 months, Liu Yunqing's sweeping movements have also become quite similar. Although his movements are not as gentle as those of the skinny old man, his appearance is also very similar. The thin old man spoke for the first time and looked at Liu Yun, saying, "Your breath is not right." Liu Yun was taken aback for a moment and didn't react for a long time. The skinny old man continued, with one dance and one movement, all 4 limbs and bones follow their natural flow, and the qi of the 5 elements of heaven and earth flows within it. Movement generates yang, stillness generates yin, and movement and stillness are their roots. Liu Yun firmly memorized the teachings taught by the lean old man, although he couldn't immediately comprehend them, he gradually integrated them. This is still the reason why I have only learned its form and not its essence in the past 3 months. At this moment, upon learning the essence, he gradually became like a fish in water. Liu Yun quietly understood the key points of the mnemonic, and his body danced with it. Surprisingly, the broom was also waved gracefully like a thin old man. 3 months have passed, and Liu Yun has basically mastered the sweeping techniques and body shape of the skinny old man. Every time he waves his broom, he becomes more and more stylish. He began to develop curiosity about the thin old man, wanting to know his background and why he would do sweeping work at the Xianjian Gate. One day, Liu Yun mustered the courage to seek advice from a thin old man. The thin old man smiled and pondered for a moment before asking Liu Yun, "Why are you cultivating immortality?" Liu Yun remembered the scene when he had just started. After his parents passed away, he lived a begging life. Although the conditions were difficult after arriving at the Xianjian Gate, life here made him feel comfortable and safe. So he firmly replied, "Survival." The thin old man was momentarily stunned upon hearing this, as if he was somewhat surprised by Lu Yun's answer. He murmured to himself, many people have their own opinions on the path of cultivating immortality, but in fact, the ultimate meaning is eternal life. It's really rare for you to understand such a truth at such a young age. Lu Yun was also stunned after hearing this. He didn't expect the skinny old man to evaluate his answer like this. He began to realize that the path he had chosen was not so simple, but one that required more effort and cost. The skinny old man saw Lu Yun's confusion and comforted him, saying, "The two techniques you mentioned before about exchanging cannot be said to be useless. Control and imperial weapon are both the most basic skills and indispensable basic techniques for cultivators. You cannot practice because you don't have magical tools, but have you ever thought about what magical tools are?" Lu Yun was taken aback when he heard that he had not seriously considered this issue before. The skinny old man continued, "Can controller art only control magic tools? Can't control things below magic tools?" Upon hearing this, Lu Yun suddenly realized that he had only focused on higher level treasures before, and had overlooked things at lower levels. The thin old man smiled slightly and continued, "Everything can be a tool, it depends on how you use it. Find the book Garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. After speaking, his broom soared into the air, like a golden dragon waving its teeth and claws, flipping up and down in the air. The thin old man jumped onto the broom and flew over the sky. After landing, the skinny old man put away his broom, smiled, and asked, "Whether it's control or control, it's all about one character. Everything can be a tool, it depends on how you use it." Lu Yun bowed deeply to the thin old man, grateful in his heart. The skinny old man just smiled and said, "The way to survive is nothing more than strength. If you are much stronger than others, you can have a higher probability of survival. If you want to learn martial arts again next time, you can learn some skills to escape. Being able to escape is also a skill." Lu Yun silently listened to the teachings of the thin old man, deeply imprinting every word in his heart. The skinny old man continued to explain, "There are many types of attacks, among which the most common are external force attacks and spell attacks. Attacks made using treasures or power are called external force attacks, while attacks released through spiritual power-driven spells are called spell attacks." Lu Yun still knows these commonly used common sense, but he listens attentively and attentively. The skinny old man continued, "In fact, there are some attacks beyond the two types of attacks that some people do not master. Attacks that are not mastered by others can have unexpected effects, which is also the key point I want to tell you." Lu Yun was attracted by the words of the skinny old man, which he had never heard of before. The skinny old man continued, "Divine sense attack is a means of attack that uses divine sense to attack the opponent. Phantom attacks create illusions to defeat the enemy. Soundwave attacks use sound waves to attack the opponent. Curse a unique technique. Poison attacks poison the opponent, causing the heavier to die and the lighter to reduce combat power." After talking about these attack methods, the thin old man turned around and disappeared from Lu Yun's sight. Chapter 2. Nourishing the Spirit Technique. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, more than a month has passed, and Lu Yun has never seen his figure again since the last communication with the thin old man, as if he has disappeared out of thin air. On that path, it has been replaced by an external disciple who is similar to him, with a layer of cultivation for refining qi and focusing on completing the tasks in his hand every day. In the past month, Lu Yun's realm has successfully broken through to the second level of qi refining. Even Lu Yun himself was surprised by this speed, perhaps because he had practiced the techniques taught by the lean old man. Every time he cleaned up, he looked at the broom in his hand as he pleased, and found that his meridians seemed to expand every time. The reason why spiritual power is rapidly introduced into the body through the expansion of meridians is that it surges rapidly in each meridian. The figure of a thin old man appeared in Lu Yun's mind. Having lost his loved one since childhood, he has been living alone in the world. The kindness of a thin old man has given him inexplicable warmth. Now Lu Yun really misses the skinny old man. During this month, after various inquiries, it was only known that the thin old man usually cleans this path alone, and no one knows which hospital he belongs to. In a narrow cave in the ethereal courtyard, Lu Yun is controlling a stone to practice his control skills. Failed. Failed again. This is very normal. Lu Yun is not in a hurry, it's his first contact. 10 days later, a stone was already skillfully controlled. Now let's start controlling 2 stones. 10 more days have passed, and 2 stones are interspersed with each other without colliding, hitting the circular ring on the wall of the cave at the same time. Lu Yun smiled contentedly, knowing that he was already quite proficient in controlling 2 stones. There is still 1 month left to complete the cleaning task, and Lu Yun should think carefully about how to exchange 200 points of contribution for a suitable technique for himself. Cannot exchange useless techniques like last time. Fortunately, with the guidance of a skinny old man, one's control technique can still control items under the spell. In the remaining time, Lu Yun should consider which cultivation method is more suitable for him to exchange. The imperial weapon technique can only be used when one reaches the 3rd level of qi refining. Inside the Sutra Pavilion, Lu Yun carefully read the introduction of each martial arts technique and selected useful ones for himself. When you want to exchange, don't be aimless or make mistakes in your choices. In recent days, in addition to practicing controller techniques, Lu Yun has also visited Tingxian Pavilion to read various introductions of martial arts in jade slips. Among the jade slips with a contribution of less than 1,000, Lu Yun has already read most of them, and the number of controlled stones has also increased to 3. Lu Yun walked out of Tingxian Pavilion, completed the task, received 200 contribution points, and began practicing the newly exchanged technique. Nourishing Spirit Technique according to his memory. The Nourishing Spirit Technique is a technique for cultivating spiritual consciousness, and Lu Yun decided to use this technique to carry out some surprise attacks. In the Nourishing Spirit Technique, although there were some simple methods of using divine consciousness attacks and techniques, Lu Yun ultimately chose it because the consumption contribution of this technique was relatively low, only 20 points of contribution. In addition, Lu Yun also favored several other martial arts techniques, such as fireball technique, earth wall technique, suspension technique, etc. However, the contribution of these techniques is above 130 points, so it is necessary to earn more contribution points in future missions in order to exchange them. However, at this moment, Lu Yun is immersed in practicing the Nourishing technique, and his ability to control stones has also significantly improved. He added his divine sense to each stone and controlled it more effortlessly. At this time, his spiritual cultivation progress was not slow, although some time was spent on cultivation, it also laid the foundation for his future battles. As he began to learn and delve deeper into the cultivation of the nourishing essence, he found that his progress in other areas was also significant. He believes that as time goes on, he will become stronger and stronger. After 3 months, Lu Yun has reached the 2nd level of cultivating the nourishing essence. There is a technique called divine control in the 2nd layer of the Nourishing Spirit technique, which works similarly to the control technique. The two blend together for better results. Now Lu Yun can control 8 stones at the same time, but controlling 8 stones at the same time consumes a considerable amount of divine consciousness. However, this is also the best way to enhance the growth of spiritual consciousness. A few more months later, Lu Yun became even more satisfied with the cultivation effect of the Nourishing God technique. Divine Sting is a divine consciousness attack technique in the Nourishing God technique, which can be used when cultivating to the 3rd level. Mainly to attack the opponent's divine sense. Although it is not uncommon, there are still very few people who practice such techniques today. It has been half a year now. Apart from practicing the spirit nourishing technique and control technique, Lu Yun has not taken on any sect tasks. If this continues, it will not be possible. He has decided to go to Tingshan Pavilion to see if there are any more tasks to take on. Lu Yun had just left the cave when he saw Xiaobizi appearing outside. Xiaobizi grew up in the Xianjian sect from a young age. His mother was also a disciple of the Xianjian sect, but unfortunately died during a sect mission. Since then, Xiaobizi has been taken in by the Xianjian sect. After Lu Yun entered the Xianjian sect, the two of them often played together due to their shared interests. Lu Yun didn't hesitate to share some things that he didn't understand about the Immortal Sword sect with Xiaobizi. As soon as they came and went, the two became best friends. Lu Yun, wow! You have already reached the second level of qi refining. Xiaobizi widened his eyes as if he had discovered a new continent. Lu Yun touched his nose and said awkwardly, "Yes, I've been lucky lately and I've made a breakthrough." Xiaobizi tilted his mouth and said disdainfully, "Come on, you've just broken through the second layer of qi refining for a few days, and I'm about to break through the third layer of qi refining. Don't forget, you've been calling me senior brother for a long time. It's not easy to become my senior brother." After hearing these words, Lu Yun couldn't help but laugh and said, just blow it up. Breaking through the third layer is not that easy. Xiaobizi pursed his lips and said, what do you know? I'm very skilled. Lu Yun smiled and shook his head, all right, I know you're amazing. However, it's been a long time since you came to my place. Why are you free to come to my place today? Xiaobizi suddenly remembered his purpose for coming here. He scratched his head and said, "Hi, I've been talking to you all this time. I almost forgot to tell you." Lu Yun asked curiously, "Tell me what?" Xiaobizi smiled mysteriously and said, "You should know, you have been in the Xianjian sect for almost 3 years. In 3 months, you will be our disciple Xiaobai. I'm afraid you don't know, so I came to inform you in advance to be prepared." Lu Yun was taken aback and said, "Our disciple Xiaobai. What does that mean?" Xiaobizi began to feel proud and said, "Aha, this is a great opportunity. Our disciple Xiaobai is a traditional activity of the Immortal Sword sect, and every disciple can participate. The competition will be intense, exciting, and there will be various rewards. You need to prepare well." After hearing these words, Lu Yun's heart moved and he said, "It seems I need to prepare well." After telling Lu Yun about his disciple Xiaobai, Xiaobizi began to feel proud. Lu Yun saw his foul-smelling appearance and secretly pinched the formula with his fingers. Suddenly, a stone on the ground rose up and hit Xiaobizi's forehead accurately. Xiaobizi covered his forehead, feeling pain and surprise, and let him shout out, "Ah!" Lu Yun looked at him and smiled, saying, "Xiaobizi, are you showing off your knowledge to me? You know, I've been here for almost 3 years now, and I actually know your proud disciple Xiaobi. However, I am very grateful for your enthusiasm in bringing up this information to me. However, your behavior is too obvious, so obvious that I think you are like a joke." Xiaobizi covered his forehead and looked at Lu Yun with a puzzled expression, saying, You actually know this." Lu Yun smiled and nodded, saying, "Yes, I know. And not only do I know this, but I also know that I will be our disciple Xiaobai in 3 months. However, due to your enthusiasm, I will prepare in advance." Xiaobizi touched his forehead and said in confusion, "So you just..." With a sly expression in his eyes. The fingers of the right hand are clasped together in the shape of a sword finger, reciting the Dharma formula. With one finger pointing towards Lu Yun, a sword flash hits out from the fingertips. Lu Yun was startled and flashed his figure, saying, "Xiaobizi, you're really here." His sword pierced through his collar, causing him to break out in cold sweat. However, when he was still in shock, a cold short sword hung above his head, circling slowly, and then the tip of the sword pointed towards him. Flying sword. Flying sword magic weapon. While Lu Yun was shocked, a determination arose from his heart. He immediately patted the storage bag, and 8 stones were suspended around. Xiaobizi just hit his sword finger, just to teach Liu Yun a lesson. But when Liu Yun easily dodged, he revealed his flying sword. This flying sword was passed down to him by his mother and is also one of the tokens left for him by her. It was originally intended to scare Liu Yun, but he was a bit surprised when he saw Liu Yun putting on a fight. Xiaobizi has a great advantage in flying swords, and 7 out of 10 cultivators in the Xianjian sect are sword cultivators, so there are few sects in the Xianjian sect that dare to provoke him. Xiaobizi gritted his teeth and secretly called out the word, "good," in his heart. He nodded his forehead with his fingertips and his index finger turned into a sword, waving towards Liu Yun. The flying sword was like a shooting star, piercing towards Liu Yun. Flying swords are fast and powerful, and most cultivators dare not forcefully take them. Liu Yun felt nervous when he saw the flying sword attacking. He shook his body and 8 stones roared toward Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi was startled by the situation and hurriedly withdrew his sword to defend himself. But the attack of the 8 stones could not be stopped by a flying sword. After the 2 stones were shattered by the flying sword, the other stones hit various parts of Xiaobizi's body. The sound of crackling echoed around, causing him to constantly beg for mercy in pain. Seeing that he had won, Liu Yun withdrew the stones. But he knew that the struggle between him and Xiaobizi was just a matter of loyalty. Xiaobizi was hesitant when using his flying sword and dared not let go in a fight. Therefore, I have the upper hand in the competition. If it were a life and death battle, Xiaobizi's flying sword would strike and he really didn't know how to deal with it. When did you master this skill, kid? Come and teach me, Xiaobizi said to Liu Yun with a playful smile, completely forgetting his previous unhappiness. Okay, no problem, Liu Yun replied, but you need to use the spell you used to control the flying sword first to exchange it. Xiaobizi readily agreed and took out a jade slip of martial arts from the storage bag, throwing it at Liu Yun. Liu Yun took the jade slip and placed it on his forehead. His divine sense swept away and he found it to be a sword technique jade slip called 10,000 Swords Formation. Liu Yun was overjoyed in his heart, and the 10,000 sword formation technique should be very precious. In order to find a suitable cultivation method for himself, he became a frequent guest in the Tingshan Pavilion, even the deacon recognized him. He has also read a lot of the techniques practiced by the Sword Cultivation Institute, and the techniques with the words, sword formation, are very precious. So he decided to go to Tingshan Pavilion again to see how much contribution this sword cultivation technique was worth. Then, Liu Yun took out a blank jade slip, pasted it on his forehead, and rubbed the technique of the controller onto it, handing it over to Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi happily put away the jade slip and asked Liu Yun, "Your martial arts are really good. How long have you been practicing?" After thinking for a moment, Liu Yun replied, "I've probably been practicing for over a year." Liu Yun told a small lie, but in fact, he was able to control 8 stones because he simultaneously integrated divine control into it. Without the addition of divine control, it would indeed take more than a year to cultivate solely based on controller skills. Liu Yun saw that Xiaobizi had also put away the controller technique jade slip, so he continued to ask. "You haven't explained in detail what's going on with the Xiaobi in our hospital yet." Xiaobizi pretended to look puzzled and said, "Don't you know?" Liu Yun glanced at him and knew that he was deliberately putting on airs. He urged, "Tell me quickly. I know you are a master of all things in the sect, and there is nothing you don't know. There are many disciples outside the Xianjian gate, but outside disciples in the sect do not receive a certain amount of spiritual stones and contributions every year like inside disciples. In order to motivate outside disciples to practice, there is a small competition every 3 years based on the institution, and according to their ranking, they will receive many contributions, spiritual stones, and even treasures. This is also set up to motivate outside disciples to have the motivation to practice." Little Bizi was deceived by Liu Yun and explained everything he knew. Lu Yun felt a bit discouraged after hearing this and said, "You and I are only at the second level of qi refining. I don't think we can achieve any good rankings by searching for the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Xiaobizi said, "You don't understand that. Xiaobi's ranking is based on his realm. The first, second, and third levels of the qi refining period are the lowest levels, and the rewards he receives are relatively low. The fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh levels are the second level, and the rewards are higher than the lower level. The eighth, ninth, and 10th levels are the third level, and the rewards are higher than the second level. The 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th levels are the fourth level, and the foundation building period is one level, and there are a total of 5 levels. Therefore, if we are both in the second level of qi refining, we belong to the lowest level. Okay, you also have a flying sword magic tool, and with your expertise in sword cultivation, you can achieve a good ranking in the lower ranks. Forget it, Lu Yun, don't praise me. I can't even beat you, let alone others," said Xiaobizi weakly. "Don't be humble, you think I don't know. If it were really a fight, I might really be seriously injured," Lu Yun said truthfully. Xiaobizi took the opportunity to put his arm on Lu Yun's shoulder, put his head close to Lu Yun's ear, and chuckled lightly, To be honest, we really need to prepare. The rewards for each ranking are different, so let's try our best to get a good ranking. What rewards can we two cultivators from the second level of qi refining participate in the small competition?" Lu Yun asked. "The top 10 are usually in the same level, and the top 100 are in the same level. We should be in the top 100, so there shouldn't be any problem," Xiaobizi thought for a moment and replied. After hearing this, Lu Yun hesitated for a moment. Originally, the purpose of this trip was to take on some tasks, but there were still 3 months left before Xiaobi, and as Xiaobi said, Xiaobi's reward was amazing. So Lu Yun decided to use these 3 months to practice his skills and techniques more. "I plan to start preparing well with Xiaobizi today." Chapter 3. 10,000 Swords Formation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lu Yun spent 10 days carefully studying the 10,000 swords formation he obtained from Xiaobizi, and gained a rough understanding of its content. In order to find a suitable cultivation method for himself, Lu Yun read thousands of martial arts classics in Tingxian Pavilion for 3 consecutive months, which greatly broadened his horizons. The content of the 10,000 swords formation is extensive, including methods to improve the quality of flying swords. Finger sword is the basic skill of the 10,000 swords formation, which uses the convergence of the index and middle fingers to shoot sword energy from the 2 fingertips. After studying, Lu Yun understood the true meaning of the finger sword and began to cultivate it. After multiple attempts, Lu Yun found that cultivating the finger sword was more difficult than expected, but he admired Xiaobizi's talent for cultivation. Judging from his fluency in wielding his finger sword, he has been practicing for at least a few years. Due to time constraints in the upcoming small competition, Lu Yun believes that it is not realistic to fully master the finger sword in just over 2 months. He decided to put more effort into controller art and divine control. Lu Yun put away his thoughts on practicing the finger sword, took out a stone from the storage bag, studied it for a moment, and then followed the instructions of the controller to perform the ritual. The stone was quickly refined, and divine consciousness penetrated into it, feeling like a part of the body. Lu Yun used his divine mind to control the stones flying up and down in the cave, making it very easy for him to control a single stone. When the stone reached mid-air, he suddenly silently recited, "Burst." The stones in mid-air suddenly burst, and the gravel particles scattered and splashed, hitting the walls of the cave with a loud bang. This is a simple skill in divine control. Self-destruct. As long as driven by divine sense, any treasure can self-destruct, and the higher the level of the treasure, the greater the power after self-explosion. Lu Yun may have been inspired by the self-explosion of stones, and in the past few days, he has been constantly searching for various stones. 10 days later, Lu Yun filled the ground with the stones he had collected in an undisturbed open space. He used his divine powers to control a stone to quickly stop in the air, silently muttering to himself, "Burst." The stone parked in the air suddenly burst, and powder splattered everywhere in the sky. This is the powder stone found by Lu Yun. Its exterior is unscathed from other stones, but its interior is in powder form. Therefore, Lu Yun used this stone as his trump card. He also prepared countless iron spines, which can produce countless hard stones after exploding. This is another secret weapon of his. Looking at the various stones on the ground that he had found, Lu Yun nodded with satisfaction. These stones were searched by Lu Yun for 10 days, and their internal structures are different, and their effects vary when used. It took another 10 days for Lu Yun to proficiently practice the use of these stones. There are less than 2 months left. You can try practicing this finger sword to see if it is enough. If you can successfully master the finger sword, you will have an additional skill in the fight, Lu Yun muttered to himself. He re-examined the cultivation method of finger sword, and a passage caught his attention. Finger sword, using the finger as the sword as the finger. He silently pondered the meaning of this sentence, trying to transform his hand into a sword finger in the air, feeling the wave of this finger passing through space. A month passed in a hurry, and he continued to meditate and practice his finger sword. The sound of Z sword energy breaking through the air sounded, and a white light flashed through, causing the air to crack like a piece of cloth. He stretched out his body with satisfaction, stood up, and remembered the finger sword that Xiaobizi had once wielded at him. He realized that Xiaobizi only understood the shape of the pointed sword, but did not comprehend its spirit. There is not much time left for Xiaobi. He now has a finger sword as a weapon. If he can have more experience against the enemy, his combat effectiveness will undoubtedly be greatly improved. But where are we going to find our opponents now? He was lost in thought. Suddenly, he thought of the scene of the thin old man waving his broom and cleaning the path. That technique, figure, and footwork are all very flexible and eerie. Compared to practicing alone, having opponents engage in practical exercises clearly yields better results. So he thought of further cultivating the martial arts taught by the skinny old man and transforming them into martial arts against the enemy, which may further enhance his combat effectiveness. He recalled the mnemonics, body movements, techniques, and footwork taught by the skinny old man, and compared them in the air. Although empty, various stones suddenly appeared in the air from time to time. Lu Yun stepped out, seemingly no different, but his body flashed on the other side, dazed and eerie. He constantly tried how to deal with different attacks and defenses. Oh my goodness, what kind of bad cultivation is this? There were scattered stones on the ground, and Xiaobizi sat directly on the ground, exhausted. With a flick of his right hand, he quickly wiped away the sweat from his forehead. He was panting heavily, and although the control technique seemed simple, it was actually very difficult to operate. How did Lu Yun cultivate? He can control 8 stones, it's really abnormal. He tried to control 6 stones to float. If Lu Yun were to see it, he would definitely be very surprised. For someone who has not practiced the divine consciousness technique, being able to control 6 stones in just 2 months is truly amazing. Xiaobizi felt that practicing this was not very interesting, so he packed up and went out. The date of the competition is like a spinning gyroscope, approaching in an instant. Lu Yun practiced until late last night because he had a competition today. His nervousness and excitement were like a pair of twins, entangled in every nerve of him, causing him to stay up all night. Just as it was about to break light, he finally fell asleep in a daze. However, Xiaobizi's roar was as loud as the roar of cows and donkeys, instantly waking him up from his sleep. Lu Yun opened his eyes and saw that it was still early. In a daze, he stretched lazily and walked out of the cave. He looked up and saw Xiaobizi appearing brightly at the entrance of the cave, with 6 stones suspended in front of him, playing happily. Upon seeing this scene, Lu Yun was almost so shocked that his eyes fell out. This is too incredible. In just 3 months, Xiaobizi was able to control the number of stones to 6, and the operation was quite proficient. But he still needs to rely on divine control to achieve it himself. If Lu Yun knew that Xiaobizi had controlled the quantity of 6 stones in just 2 months, he didn't know what his feelings would be. When is it now? You keep calling ghosts all the time. Do you know when I'll fall asleep? Lu Yun shouted angrily at Xiaobizi. Junior brother, how can a person who cultivates immortals have the same understanding as Ju? Xiaobizi said seriously. Fart. Lu Yun said with resentment. Try staying up all night. Xiaobizi laughed happily and grabbed Lu Yun's hand, saying, Lu Yun, let's go. Senior brother, take your spirit in spirit. Go. Don't be complacent, I'll have you call me senior brother in a few days. She shook Xiaobizi and grabbed her hand, but didn't shake it off. Xiaobizi chuckled and continued to drag him away, leaving Lu Yun with no choice but to follow. Xiaobi's position was in the inner courtyard of the ethereal courtyard, and by now there were no less than 1,000 people, which shocked Lu Yun greatly. He usually practices independently and has never seen so many cultivators before. Lu Yun remained silent as he watched thousands of people dressed in the uniform of disciples outside the gate of the immortal sword, with the unique emblem of the ethereal courtyard embroidered on their cuffs. He felt an inexplicable sense of excitement in his heart. The crowd gathered in groups of 3 or 5 to discuss, while some were familiar with Xiaobizi and approached to greet him. Lu Yun has been practicing in the ethereal gate for 2 years, but apart from Xiaobizi, everyone else is really unfamiliar. Xiaobizi and the others chatted happily, and Lu Yun began to reminisce about the techniques he had practiced. As the sound of a bell rang, Lu Yun looked up and saw that the inner courtyard of the ethereal courtyard was already filled with disciples from both the inner and outer courtyards. Xiaobizi also came over and hugged Lu Yun's shoulder, saying, Are there many people in our ethereal courtyard? Lu Yun nodded and said, Well, there are indeed quite a few. After thinking for a moment, Xiaobizi said, There are probably 13,000 people. Lu Yun didn't expect so many cultivators in the ethereal academy of the Xianjian sect. Xiaobizi continued, So the Dou leading courtyard, the Shuqi courtyard, and the Chaoyang courtyard are called the upper 3 courtyards, while our Piamiao courtyard, the 4 elephants courtyard, and the Qixiang courtyard are called the lower 3 courtyards. The resources received by each courtyard are also allocated according to their ranking order each year. Suddenly, the voice of the real person from Zhongshan, the head of the ethereal courtyard, rang out. Today is the day of the annual small competition held by the ethereal courtyard. Perhaps the new disciples have not participated in the small competition of this courtyard yet. Now I will tell you the rules of the small competition in this courtyard. Lu Yun followed his voice and saw that his face was around 50 years old, with a dark green robe and majestic eyes. Although Lu Yun's cultivation time is short, he can still feel the powerful aura emanating from the opponent. Our palm seat is a sword cultivation in the middle stage of Yuanying, whispered Xiaobizi from the side. Lu Yun was startled and couldn't help but glance away at the real person in the palm seat of Zhongshan. The other person had just looked at his position, but just glanced back. In the middle of the Yuanying period, Lu Yun muttered in a low voice. He began to look around at the environment and everyone, while silently feeling the cultivation level of the sword cultivators around him. Although Lu Yun had a short cultivation time, he also knew about the practitioner's realm. The initial cultivation period was the qi refining period, followed by the foundation building period, the golden elixir period, and finally the Yuanying period. He is not sure if there is a higher realm than the Yuanying period, but he is also unwilling to explore. He is also aware of Xiaobi's purpose this time, and rewards are undoubtedly the most tempting for these disciples. Zhongshan Immortal looked around and saw over 10,000 disciples of the ethereal courtyard listening attentively, with a longing for treasures in their eyes. He was satisfied in his heart and smiled for the first time on his face. He patted the storage bag and suddenly saw various treasures in mid-air, including flying swords, skilled jade slips, as well as some pills and talismans. The top 10 contestants in this competition can obtain these treasures, and whoever ranks high can be given priority in selecting them. His words were calm and powerful, instantly igniting the atmosphere of the whole audience. Among the many treasures, a flying sword stands out particularly, circling and dancing in mid-air, emitting bursts of cold light. Good sword. Xiaobizi couldn't help but shout out, and then a wave of cheers echoed around him. Zhongshan Jinren pinched the sword formula with his hand and silently recited it in his mouth. The flying sword danced up and down in mid-air, and with each movement, white snowflakes rose around the sword body, scattered and falling, emitting a dazzling white light. This flying sword is called Feishue, forged from ice-black iron, an exquisite magical tool. The voice of the real person Zhongshan shook the whole audience with a resounding roar. Everyone, including Liu Yun, was stunned and envied. Zhongshan Immortal took off the snow sword, pinched the sword technique again, and another fiery red flying sword flew into mid-air. At the point where the flying sword flew, there was a faint red light remaining, but it flashed away in a flash. Then, a few sparks flickered in mid-air before disappearing into the void. This flying sword is called Red Flame, and is a top-grade magical weapon made from Huiying ore. The red flame sword flew over everyone's heads, and as it passed over Liu Yun's head, a burning sensation burned his cheeks. After passing through everyone's heads, the red flame sword returned to the sky above the head of the real person in Zhongshan, circling steadily. Zhongshan Immortal looked at the heat in everyone's eyes and satisfactorily withdrew his red flame sword. Then he pointed to the remaining 8 treasures with his finger and introduced them one by one. Greenwood sword, thick earth shield, middle stage puppet of foundation building, lower level magic weapon armor, third level trap formation, heavenly collapse talisman record, and Peijin Dan, which can enhance the foundation building period and advance to the golden elixir period. Every treasure shines brightly in front of everyone, and their heart beats faster. Liu Yun looked at these treasures but did not show much interest. This does not mean that he disdains them, but rather that he is more concerned about how to improve his own strength. The last lesson made him understand that the importance of strength far outweighs these external possessions. So he turned his head and whispered to Xiaobizi, "How valuable is this called Peijin Dan?" Look at their excitement. I didn't even see their expression when the top-notch magic weapon flying sword appeared. Xiaobizi laughed and said, "I can explain this to you. Do you know that when we reach the 14th level of the Qi refining stage, we will have to break through the foundation building period? When we break through the foundation building period, if we take the foundation building pill, the probability of breaking through the foundation building period will be greatly increased. However, this Peijin pill has a high probability of promoting cultivators to the golden pill period in the later stage of foundation building, so these pills are very valuable." "I see." Liu Yun nodded, but secretly thought to himself that although this kind of thing that enhances strength is precious, it is not what he is pursuing. He prefers to improve his strength through his own efforts, and the strength he gains through searching for the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com is more solid and reliable. Our immortal sword sect mainly focuses on sword cultivation. In the same realm, sword cultivation has the highest attack power, and can even surpass and kill high-level cultivators. However, every sword cultivator's greatest desire is to have a good martial art and an excellent flying sword. Sometimes, flying swords are relatively easy to obtain, but the martial arts are difficult to obtain. Therefore, this sword cultivation technique, Yujian, is a sword cultivation technique named, Flying Blood Sword. As the true person of Zhongshan spoke, everyone around inquired about the Flying Blood Sword, but a few had heard of it. Xiaobizi beside him tugged at Liu Yun's sleeve and whispered, "Envy me, be envious. Let's work hard to cultivate in the future. When senior brother reaches the point of building a foundation, I will also rank in the top 10 and use these treasures to satisfy my craving. Lu Yun was filled with longing in his heart, without refuting or disdaining Xiaobizi. Our small competition is held every 3 years, and many people have participated countless times. Some people, due to their short entry time, have not participated at all. So let me explain the rules of the small competition in the ethereal courtyard to everyone. The elder Qingyuan, who spoke, appeared to be no more than 30 years old. This competition is the same as previous ones, divided into 5 levels. It is mainly aimed at encouraging many newcomers, and some people may not have time to participate. Lu Yun listened attentively to Elder Qingyuan's introduction. The first level is at or below the 3rd level of gas refining, which is a lower level. The second level is the 4th to 7th level of gas refining. The third level is the 8th to 10th level of gas refining. The 4th level is from 11 to the great perfection of gas refining. Finally, the first stage is above the foundation construction period. Next are some rules for other details. Lu Yun listened carefully to avoid missing a sentence. Chapter 4 begins with Xiaobi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, there are 50 arenas here, with 10 in each stage. The top 10 are prepared for the 1st to 3rd levels of qi refining, and so on. Lu Yun and Xiaobizi were assigned to the lowest stage, but fortunately, there were still many newcomers like them, about 5,000 people. Now, you all come to me to draw lots and have people of the same number compete, said a female cultivator from the Golden Elixir period. Judging from her appearance, she should be an elder. Lu Yun and Xiaobizi walked together to the drawing place, which was already filled with people, but under the aura of the golden core female cultivator, no one dared to make a loud noise. The entire lottery process proceeded in an orderly manner, although there were many people, it went very smoothly. When it was Lu Yun's turn, he finally saw that the draw they had drawn was a cauldron-shaped tool. Lu Yun reached into the cauldron-shaped artifact and touched a ball. Lu Yun picked up a round bead and took it out of the cauldron-shaped tool. He looked in his hand, smooth and delicate, and couldn't see any words. Just as he was puzzled, the voice of the female cultivator Jindan rang in his ear. Input your spiritual power into the Yuan Shizhu and your number will be displayed. Lu Yun followed the instructions of the golden core female cultivator, inputting spiritual power into the Yuan stone pearl. The Yuan stone pearl gradually lit up, displaying the words, 427. Number 652. Lu Yun, how many numbers did you draw? Xiaobizi asked Lu Yun after finishing drawing the lots. Number 427. The two of them walked to the side with Yuan Shizhu, waiting for the others to finish drawing lots. At this moment, the other side of the arena was stirred up by various prohibitions, and then came the voice of the presiding elder. Surprisingly, other levels of competition had already begun. On Lu Yun's side, due to the larger number of people in other grades, the draw has not yet ended. Everyone looked bored at the distant arena, although it was quite far away, it could be vaguely seen. I saw the figure on the arena dancing and the sword shining brightly. Lu Yun watched several competitions in the distance, but found that almost all of them were competing with flying swords, and everyone held flying swords. Lu Yun asked Xiaobizi in confusion. Flying sword tools are very rare. Although they are several levels higher than us, why is everyone so wealthy? Every swordsman has flying sword tools. It's a bit strange, don't you think flying swords and magical tools are all cabbage, all over the ground? These are all semi-magical tools. Although they are similar to magical tools in the battle, they are still vastly different in essence, said Xiaobizi. This is the first time Lu Yun has heard of the term, half-magic tool. Half-magic weapons are actually ordinary weapons, with grooves left during the forging process. When used, spirit stones are embedded in the grooves. Its function is similar to magic weapons, but compared to real magic weapons, it is much inferior. However, the advantage is that it is easy to forge and the price is lower. Xiaobizi was born in the Xianjian Gate. Although his realm is not high, he has a wide range of knowledge. Lu Yun is tempted. He can't buy magic tools himself, but it's still good to get half of them. Alright, now the draw is over and the arena is open. A loud voice interrupted Lu Yun's contemplation. The speaker is a bearded man, about 40 years old, with a cultivation level of the golden elixir. This is Tian Kai, the elder of the ethereal courtyard. He is a straightforward and kind-hearted person, Little Bizi explained, knowing that Lu Yun didn't know many people. Sound echoed everywhere, and the prohibitions on the 10 arena were simultaneously activated. Lu Yun and other low-level cultivators all had an excited expression on their faces, and their eyes were filled with longing. At this moment, Jindan Nuxius said, "The competition is now starting. The first arena is 1, the second arena is 2, and the third arena is." The cultivator holding the number 1 Yuanshe Zhu climbed onto the arena, and the person in charge of the number 1 arena was a cultivator from the Jianji period, dressed in the attire of an inner disciple. 2 first and second level qi refining cultivators have stepped onto the arena and handed over the yuan stone beads to the disciples of the inner gate during the foundation period who are in charge of the arena. Other contestants on the arena have also arrived one after another, most of whom are second-tier qi refining players. Among them, 2 third-tier qi refining players appeared simultaneously on the 5th arena. Lu Yun turned his gaze to the first arena, and neither of the contestants sent out their treasures, standing bare-handed. Lu Yun was very curious about both of them. When he was refining the first layer of qi, he had no other martial arts except for the condensing qi technique. If he went up on his own, he could only go up and down. At this moment, the 2 people on the first arena had already handed over their hands. The second-level cultivator of qi refining led the attack first, and a hockey spell hit the first-level cultivator. The first-level cultivator suddenly gathered a fireball in his hand, but before it could be triggered, he was hit by the ice ball of the second-level cultivator. A thin layer of frost formed on his body, frozen in place, and the fireball in his hand extinguished silently. Sun Jisheng. As the host of Jianji finished speaking, the first-level cultivator of qi refining had already broken through the ice, his face pale, and he lowered his head to the arena. With just one move, the second-level cultivator of qi refining defeated the first-level cultivator, which is the difference. Shortly after the battle ended on the first arena, the second, third, and fourth they began their battle in sequence. Lu Yun can see that the matches on these arenas are not fair. The players on the second level of gas refining are generally much stronger than those on the first level. Their mastery of spells and judgment of the battle situation far exceed that of players in the realm of qi refining. But what shocked Lu Yun were the players who refined 3 layers of gas. Their strength is even more formidable than anyone can match. They not only demonstrated strong strength and exquisite combat skills in the battle, but also demonstrated flexible use of spells and precise control of the battle situation. Their strength and experience are obviously much higher than other players. Watching these battles, Lu Yun couldn't help but feel a hint of inferiority in his heart. He found that his cultivation was far from enough. Although his realm has reached the second level of qi refining, his mastery of spells is far from sufficient. He has almost no knowledge of combat experience and skills. This made him deeply aware of his shortcomings. In stark contrast to the fierce competition in the first arena, the battles in other arenas are equally intense. Especially the duel between the 2 qi refining triple-layer cultivators in the 5th arena, their duel was particularly intense, as if destined to collide in the first round. These 2 cultivators are both sword cultivators of similar age, both around 20 years old. One of them has curly hair, a tall nose bridge, and a pair of huge eyes. The other person has slightly dark skin, thick eyebrows, big eyes, a robust figure, and emits a strong masculine flavor. Their respective flying swords crisscrossed in mid-air, occasionally emitting a crisp collision sound. Jianxiu, whose skin was slightly black, suddenly spat out his sword technique and quickly pinched his fingers. His flying sword spun in the air, forming a huge vortex. Suddenly, his gaze sharpened, and the tip of his sword suddenly descended, piercing straight at the curly-haired sword cultivator on the opposite side. Seeing this scene, Lu Yun was shocked in his heart. He was well aware of the immense power of this sword, and if it were him, he would definitely not be able to take it. The curly-haired sword faced the sudden attack with a stern expression. He quickly flicked the storage bag and flew out a small shield. The surface of this shield is made of steel, shining with dazzling light. With a loud bang, the swords and shields collided. The curly-haired sword cultivator was shaken back and forth, almost touching the edge of the arena. Magic tool! Lu Yun shouted out loud. Xiaobizi sneered and said, "Damn it. This is also a half-magic weapon. Do you think anyone can have a magic weapon like me? Stinky display." Lu Yun ignored him and continued to watch the battle. At this moment, the two of them fought for 2 or 3 more rounds, seemingly evenly matched. But upon careful observation, it can be found that sword cultivators with slightly darker skin have a slight advantage. In order to have a clearer view of the duel between the two, Lu Yun and Xiaobizi came to the vicinity of the 5th arena and observed their duel up close. Their breathing was clear and audible, and even the sound of each sword strike could be heard. Jianxiu, whose skin was slightly black, spoke up and said, "Breaking the army, your swordsmanship is born from the heart, but you are too forward-looking and hesitant. To make greater progress in swordsmanship, you need to forget all obstacles and move forward courageously." As he spoke, his flying sword had already launched an attack like lightning, with an incredibly sharp sword. Breaking through the front shield of the army to resist the attack of the flying sword, while controlling the flying sword to participate in the attack. My swordsmanship is born from my heart. What you think of as swordsmanship is to move forward without hesitation, using attack instead of defense. That's just your way, not mine, said Pajun. Then I'll see your way. The slightly dark sword cultivation magic urged, and the flying sword spiritual light shone everywhere, accelerating the pace of the attack. Not far from the arena, 2 Jindan period hosts are also paying attention to the competition on the 5th arena. These two people's flying swords have penetrated deep into their bones and will surely become great weapons in the future, said the Golden Core Nu Xiu. Not bad, one of these two is assertive and domineering, while the other is composed and experienced. I don't think it's as good as this. I'll train the sword cultivation of the famous sword with domineering momentum, and let Li Daoyu train the sword cultivation of the composed and experienced. I wonder what Elder Li thinks. Tian Kai said. The female cultivator of the Golden Core period snorted and said, "You have a good idea, Elder Tian. It seems that the seedlings you have chosen are all top-notch, and the ones you have chosen for me are not as good as those you have chosen. I think we should replace them." After hearing this, Tian Kai looked embarrassed, but he didn't say anything more, instead he fell into contemplation. The duel between the two on the 5th arena has reached a white-hot point. Jianxiu, with slightly darker skin, gradually gained control and his sword movements became more agile. With another sound of impact, the flying sword collided with the shining shield. Pajun's face became increasingly ugly, gradually revealing a decadent lack of mana. "Xiaobizi, do you know these two people?" Old Lu Yun asked, pointing to 2 young people in the arena who were fighting fiercely. Xiaobizi turned his gaze to the 2 of them and nodded, saying, "The sword cultivator who took the initiative in the field is called Chai Chang. He has been at the beginner's level for 4 years, and because of his loyalty, all the cultivators at the same time respect him. Although he is a 3rd-level cultivator, his strength is not even afraid of the 6th-level cultivator. The one who fights against him is called Pajun. He only entered the beginner's level 1 year earlier than you, but he is talented and intelligent. In 3 years, he has already cultivated his realm to the 3rd level. These two people's strength should be considered the highest in our team, right? Lu Yun seemed to be looking forward to this battle. Yeah, if nothing unexpected happens, there should be a place for the two of them in the top 10, Xiaobizi said, but shook his head somewhat helplessly. How can fate manipulate people? He gave Lu Yun a strange smile. How do I see your child looking like he's gloating? Lu Yunmin keenly sensed Xiaobizi's emotions. He, Xiaobizi said with a bitter smile, you're no different. The more experts we meet, the higher our ranking will be. Lu Yun laughed heartily this time and hugged Xiaobizi's shoulder, saying, this is what makes heroes think alike. Xiaobizi shook Lu Yun's arm off his shoulder with some dissatisfaction and said, this is my signature move, how did you learn it? Lu Yun ignored it and once again placed his arm on Xiaobizi's shoulder, feeling a warm surge in his heart. This battle is still ongoing, and regardless of the outcome, it will be beneficial for him and Xiaobizi. On a noisy 10 arena, except for the 5th arena, the players on the other arena have changed multiple times. And the two players on the 5th ring are still in a fierce battle, no matter how high or low they are. It's almost over. Tian Kai said with fiery eyes, his tone full of anticipation. At this moment, I saw Chai Chang's long sword constantly dancing in his hand, and the spell in his mouth was also recited like flowing water. The flying sword gradually grew larger in mid-air, like the size of a door panel. With a flick of the sword technique, the giant sword fell from the sky, and the surrounding air waves rolled and shook people's hearts. Upon seeing this, Pajun's face changed drastically. He knew very well that with his own strength, he could never withstand this fatal blow. So he quickly offered the shining shield, held it above his head, and sprayed a mouthful of blood essence onto the shield. As he recited the Dharma formula in his mouth, a earthen wall rose up from the ground, forming a solid defense. The giant sword, the size of a door panel, fell down like a bamboo, unstoppable and headed towards the defense of the enemy. With just a click, the shining shield of the army shattered and failed to stop it at all. Then, the earthen wall was also cut through without any obstruction by the giant sword. The army shouted in despair, no, filled with fear and despair. Just as the blade was about to strike the enemy, two figures had already rushed onto the arena. The army was swept up by one of the figures and quickly left the arena, while the other figure waved his long sleeve and dissipated Chai Chang's sword power. After landing, Pajun had already passed out, and the person who saved him was Tian Kai. The one who removed the sword's momentum was the Jindan Nuxiu, who had already taken Chai Chang off the arena. This thrilling struggle ultimately came to an end in this way. Chai Chang saw the deep scars on Pajun's body, and his heart was filled with worry. He knew that it was not allowed to harm the opponent's life in the internal competition of the sect. If intentionally done, severe individuals will be stripped of their cultivation, while mild individuals will also receive severe punishment. He bowed to the two elders in charge of the golden elixir period and said, Disciple Chai Chang has met two elders. Just now, the disciple was not proficient in learning and couldn't hold back the momentum. Fortunately, the two elders arrived, otherwise it might cause a big disaster. Please punish the two elders. Tian Kai was busy putting a pill into the mouth of the army, but before he could speak, he heard the Jindan nun standing next to Chai Chang say, The final use of your great heroic sunset sword is extremely difficult to control. It is rare for you to cultivate this sword technique to such an extent. It is not easy to achieve ease of retraction and release, and it is not your fault. She changed her tone and continued, You are very good. You have a strong mind and are persistent in swordsmanship. You are a good student. Do you want to apprentice to me? As soon as Jindan Nuxiu finished speaking, Chai Chang had not yet replied, but he heard Tian Kai beside Pajun shout angrily. Li Fengyun. This kid was the one I first fell in love with. I just told you earlier, you're going too far. Li Fengyun smiled and said, "Joke, Tian Kai, you mentioned to me that you wanted to take him as your disciple, but when did I agree to your request? Everyone wants a good seedling. If you want to take him as your disciple, it depends on whether you have that ability." Chai Chang stood awkwardly in place, and this scene greatly exceeded his expectations. He didn't know what to do for a moment. At this moment, a voice rang in Chai Chang's ear. "I think your great sunset sword only has one layer, and you also know the preciousness of this sword technique. The exchange contribution of a mere layer of great sunset sword requires 800 points, while the second layer requires 6,000 points, and the third layer requires 30,000 points. This sword technique has a total of 13 layers. You have already completed the first layer sword technique, but the second layer sword technique has not yet landed, right?" Li Fengyun said to Chai Chang. "Yes." Chai Chang respectfully replied. Tian Kai felt a sense of unease as Li Fengyun continued, "I happen to have the second and third layers of the Great English Sunset Sword. If you join my sect now, you can take these 2 and 3 layers of the Great English Sunset Sword. As for the remaining layers, it depends on your future abilities. So, are you willing to learn from me?" As he spoke, 2 jade slips were taken out of the storage bag by Li Fengyun and handed to Chai Chang. Tian Kai saw Li Fengyun's movements and his face changed slightly. He also said to Chai Chang, "Although I don't have the technique of the Great Sunset Sword for you, I can make you a disciple of the inner sect. Do you know that in this small competition, each elder can recommend a disciple to be promoted to the inner sect, so the quota is very limited and precious. Elderly has already promised someone else the quota of inner sect disciples, so if you want to become an inner sect disciple, you can only rely on me as your teacher. After becoming an inner disciple, there are a large number of resources given by the sect as rewards every year, as well as some specific martial arts that can be exchanged, which are treatment that outer disciples cannot enjoy. You can consider it. Although the Daying Sunset Sword is good, it can be exchanged as long as there is enough contribution from the sect, and the cultivation techniques after the 4th level can only be exchanged within the inner sect. Even if there is too much contribution from external disciples, it is useless. You can consider it now." Li Fengyun frowned and said seriously, "Tian Kai, you can't speak like that. I always keep my word, and I have already given someone else the recommended spot this time, but next time Xiaobi, I will definitely recommend it to him. If you don't believe me, forget it." After hearing this, Tian Kai burst out laughing and said, Li Fengyun, you really can make people happy. The next small competition will be 3 years after the big competition, and now there are still 2 years left until the big competition. That means we have to wait for 5 years before the next small competition. But you want to delay someone's time for 5 years, what's this? Li Fengyun blushed with anger at Tian Kai's words and said, "Tian Kai, don't go too far. I have my thoughts, and you also have your thoughts. But my promise won't change. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Xiaobizi, the exchange of the 3rd layer of the Daying Sunset Sword requires 30,000 contribution points. It seems to be a top-level swordsmanship. I don't know how it compares to your 10,000 swords formation," Lu Yun asked Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi scratched his head for a moment, thought for a moment, and said, "Well, it's hard to say. My 10,000 swords formation was taught by my mother's master, a great master in the later stage of the golden elixir. Its level should not be low, and as for who is good and who is bad, it's really hard to judge." Upon hearing this, Lu Yun couldn't help but sigh and say, "It's really amazing. The contribution of the 3rd layer exchange of the British Sunset Sword is 30,000 points, so it must be a very powerful swordsmanship." Xiaobizi nodded and said, "Yes, it sounds very attractive. However, my 10,000 swords formation is not bad either. I have been practicing and feel more and more proficient." Lu Yun listened and said sincerely, "Thank you." Xiaobizi was taken aback for a moment and blurted out, "Are you sick?" Thank me for what? Judging from your expression, it's really numbing. Thank you for giving me this precious swordsmanship. Lu Yun said. Isn't that an exchange between the two of us? If you're willing, we'll each have something to gain. Don't think I don't know, just my broken martial arts can be exchanged with only a few dozen points of sect contribution. You're just looking for a reason to exchange, Lu Yun said. Upon hearing this, Xiaobizi said with an embarrassed expression, you don't know me well. I just need to like it. How could you say so great? Lu Yun rested his arm on Xiaobizi's shoulder and earnestly asked, are we good brothers? Of course, we are lifelong good brothers. He said, placing his arm on Lu Yun's shoulder. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, everything in silence. Chapter 5. Flying Needle Defeats Enemies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Lu Yun no longer cares about the scene of the two elders competing for Chai Chang. He is thinking about how to deal with it if he stands in front of the stage. At present, what he lacks the most is weapons for attack and defense. But combined with his own cultivation techniques, what kind of weapon does he need? Flying Needle. Lu Yun suddenly had a flash of inspiration. If he could control a set of flying needles, it would greatly enhance his threat. Hey, kid, what are you thinking? You're laughing all by yourself, looking like a slutty guy. Xiaobizi interrupted Lu Yun's thinking. Hey, I said Xiaobizi. If we continue to compete at this pace, when can we play? At least 3 or 4 days later. Xiaobizi replied. Can you confirm? No. Competition is a constantly changing thing, anything can happen, I'm just speculating. Upon hearing this answer, Lu Yun didn't say much and fell back into contemplation. He must be prepared for everything. What are you asking about this, kid? Is there anything I can do? Little Bizi asked curiously. Lu Yun did not immediately answer Xiaobizi's question, but asked again, Xiaobizi, do you know where there is a place to make half-magic tools? What do you want to build? Little Bizi became more energetic after hearing it. I want to create a set of flying needle half-magic tools. I'm familiar with this, I'll take you there. He said, pulling up Lu Yun and leaving. In a cave in the inner courtyard of the ethereal courtyard, a skinny old man was holding a hammer and constantly waving it, as if performing a solo dance. Although his movements are powerful, they are precise and skillful, as if every blow has been accurately calculated. At this moment, the messenger jade plaque hanging from his waist suddenly lit up, and the skinny old man put down his hammer and picked up the messenger jade plaque to look at. His expression was originally serious, but when he saw the information on the jade plaque, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but smile. He muttered to himself, what's this little rabbit doing here again? I've had enough of the things here for this little rabbit. Let's see if there's anything else and put it away quickly. Although his tone was filled with self-deprecation and helplessness, the cunning and wit in his eyes exposed his true feelings. He knew that the arrival of this little rabbit might bring him some new fun and challenges, which was also the seasoning of life he had been looking forward to. Putting down the messenger jade plaque, the skinny old man turned and walked towards the depths of the cave, with a smile still on his lips. He knew that next, he needed to prepare well to welcome the arrival of this little rabbit. The stone door of the cave was slowly opened, and Bizi shouted impatiently. Old man, why did you come out to open the door now? Did you hide something good? I'd better go in and double it. As soon as the words ended, he went into the lean old man's cave, leaving Lu Yun embarrassed. The skinny old man looked at Lu Yun and his expression became solemn. He asked, are you? Lu Yun saw that the old man was already in the late stage of foundation construction, so he quickly clasped his fists and bowed politely, saying, returning to the senior, the disciple is Lu Yun, a disciple of the ethereal courtyard outside. Why did that little rabbit call you over here? I would like to ask the senior to help me build a set of flying needles and half-magic tools. No, I don't have time now. You better go back. The skinny old man waved his hand and refused. Lu Yun was feeling at a loss when he suddenly saw Xiaobizi rushing out of the cave. He shouted loudly, "Old man, Lu Yun is my brother. You have to use this flying needle half-magic tool even if you have time, and even if you don't have time, you have to use it." The skinny old man's eyes widened and he cursed, "Hey, you little bunny, you don't know how to respect your elders at all. What's wrong? You still want to force me to fail?" "I'm forcing you, what's going on?" Xiaobizi answered fearlessly, with his hands on his hips and his neck raised. The skinny old man shook his head and said helplessly, Okay. You're my little ancestor, okay." Xiaobizi happily hugged the skinny old man's neck and excitedly said, "Uncle Zhang, it's still you." The skinny old man lightly patted Xiaobizi's buttocks and cursed with a smile, "You little bunny, if you use it, you'll be called Zhangbo. If you don't use it, you'll be called old man. What a injustice." "Huh," Xiaobizi also laughed happily, "Uncle Zhang, you're the best." The skinny old man looked at Lu Yun and asked seriously, "What kind of flying needle half-magic weapon do you want to make?" 427, The Fifth Arena. With the host's resounding voice, Lu Yun walked calmly towards the fifth arena. Accompanying him on the field was also a cultivator on the second level of qi refining. He was a man of his age, fair-skinned, handsome, and with a hint of cunning in his eyes. After the two of them boarded the arena, they handed over the Yuan Shizhu to the host for inspection and then registered it. Lu Yun carefully observed the other party and couldn't help but become wary in his heart. The monk's eyes flashed with a hint of pride, as if he had already seen through Lu Yun's background. With the host's command, the competition officially begins. The two of them moved in an instant. Lu Yun slapped the storage bag and 3 stones were sacrificed, while the fair-skinned cultivator quickly condensed a fireball in his hand. With a flick of his hand, the fireball flew straight towards Lu Yun's body. In the past few days of competitions, Lu Yun observed some of the players' combat styles. Most players in the qi refining layer only use some basic spells, such as fireball, ice hockey, wind blade, and so on, with fireball being particularly common. The players on the second level of qi refining are more complex, some will use basic spells for combination attacks and defense, while others will directly use flying swords for attacks. Almost all the players in the third layer of gas refining use flying swords. Faced with the flying fireball, Lu Yun was not panicked. In the past few days, he has simulated such scenes countless times in his mind and has many strategies for how to deal with them. He took a step forward with his left foot and turned his body to the left, using the body techniques taught by an old sweeper. Fireball was easily dodged by Lu Yun, and 3 stones attacked each other's cultivators. Facing these 3 stones, Fang Kai also felt a bit panicked in his heart. Although he had thought of many ways to confront the enemy, this was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He retreated in panic, but still couldn't avoid the speed of the stones. With 3 clear sounds of pa pa pa, none of the 3 stones fell, hitting Fang Kai's head separately. In the midst of Fang Kai's dizziness, Lu Yun took the opportunity to take out a 5-foot-long iron rod from the storage bag and quickly smashed it onto Fang's head. Fang Kai fell in response and fainted. This 5-foot-long iron rod was found by Lu Yun in Zhang Bo's cave. After asking Zhang Bo for it, he didn't hesitate to give it to Lu Yun. There are still many ordinary wrought iron sticks like this in the cave, so Zhang Bo doesn't care either. Lu Yun wins. The host glanced at Fang Kai lying unconscious on the arena and announced that there was nothing serious. Lu Yun walked off the arena and Xiaobizi came to congratulate him. Lu Yun is not bad. It will be over in 1 or 2 rounds, senior brother. I'll keep an eye on you. Lu Yun didn't speak, just smiled slightly as he savored the battle just now. Although the opponent is too weak, how should one cope if they are facing Chai Chang and Pajun? What are you thinking? Xiaobizi asked when he saw Lu Yun's somewhat absent-minded expression. I was summarizing the game just now. Lu Yun blurted out without even thinking. Pretend to fart. Xiaobizi muttered, rolling his eyes and ignoring him. Lu Yun is still watching the upcoming competition, wanting to understand each opponent and see how they compete. He has watched hundreds of matches, but there are few as intense as the one between Chai Chang and Pajun. Most of them are ordinary, with occasional sword cultivators from the third level of Qi refining, but the opponents they encounter are very weak. They hastily ended the battle in 3 or 4 rounds, and some even admitted defeat directly to the first level of Qi refining players. Fortunately, during the 10 arena competition at the same time, Lu Yun still had many options to watch, so he didn't get bored watching. In sharp contrast to Lu Yun, Xiaobizi felt very bored but had to watch. Fortunately, it's time for him to compete soon, and he can finally get rid of this agonizing state. Number 652, come to the 7th arena. With the voice of the host of the 7th arena, it was Xiaobizi's turn to take the stage this time. Lu Yun patted Xiaobizi's shoulder and encouraged, don't lose face. If you lose, I will look down on you. Don't worry, who am I? Little Bizi made a face at Lu Yun and confidently walked onto the arena. Seeing Xiaobizi's opponent take the stage, Lu Yun couldn't help but sigh. Xiaobizi's luck was extremely bad. His opponent turned out to be a sword cultivator with 3 levels of Qi refining. After the host announced the start, the two of them began to resist each other and urged their swords to participate in the attack. The flying sword used by the Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator has a width 3 times that of Xiaobizi's flying sword and a length more than half that of Xiaobizi's flying sword. Xiaobizi's flying sword is called Qingyue, which is a lower-grade magical weapon characterized by extremely fast speed. When the Qingyue sword was unleashed by Xiaobizi, it circled around the top of its head, and then the tip of the sword pointed towards the 3rd layer of Qi refining sword cultivation, without stopping, galloping away. Seeing Xiaobizi's skillful use of the flying sword, Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator couldn't help but be surprised, but he quickly calmed down and shouted, "Good guy," and raised his giant sword to smash at Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi ignored this and continued to pinch the sword technique, directing the Qingyue sword to stab the Qi refining 3rd-layer sword. The cultivation of the Qi refining 3-layer sword has to be defended because the speed of the Qingyue sword is too fast. She, suddenly wielded a giant sword and shouted, "Long." Then, the sword grew in an instant, several times larger than usual, and transformed into a shield shape. The Qingyue sword made a piercing sound and penetrated the giant sword, but its speed also slowed down. Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator was startled and broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly retreated and recalled the giant sword in his hand. Lu Yun sighed and said, "Unfortunately, if Xiaobi had enough magic, then this competition would have ended long ago. Unfortunately, Xiaobi only has the magic power of the 2nd layer of Qi refining, and even the 2nd skill of the 10,000 sword formation, Imperial Sword, appears to be barely exerted." As a result, he tried his best but was unable to break through the obstruction of the giant sword. At the moment of Lu Yun's regret, Xiaobizi also appeared helpless. The 2nd skill of the 10,000 swords formation, Imperial Sword, can be practiced by reaching the 2nd level of Qi refining, but due to limited mana control, it is difficult to achieve the best effect. At this moment, the Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator had already adjusted. He looked at the huge sword with a hole in its body in pain, and a fierce light appeared in his eyes. He shouted loudly, "Look at the amazing skills I'm using to break through the enemy." As the words fell, the giant sword widened and enlarged again. He clasped his hands and swung toward Xiaobizi from top to bottom. Lu Yun looked at him and felt surprised in his heart. This Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator has a very strong magical power. This strike may seem simple, but in reality, the pressure on both sides has already restrained the position of Xiaobizi. At the level of refining the second layer of qi with Xiaobizi, it is impossible to break free from the constraints of air pressure. Lu Yun is very close to the arena and can feel this change. Xiaobizi appeared decisive, his fingers trembling lightly, and the Qingyue sword roared straight towards the throat of the third-layer sword cultivator. Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator was very angry. This is another move. But he also knew that this time he couldn't resist it by pressing against his chest like before. Instead, he needed to directly strike the Qingyue sword when he aimed the giant sword at Xiaobizi. Lu Yun saw the giant sword of the Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivation being struck, and knew that even if the Qingyue sword was a magical weapon, if it was struck from top to bottom by the giant sword, it would still be damaged. If we want to retreat, we will become passive and lose the initiative. This made him curious about how Xiaobizi responded. Xiaobizi pinched the sword technique with his fingers and lifted the Qingyue sword upwards, making it move from a fast forward motion to facing the giant sword from bottom to top. With a click, the originally broad giant sword was unexpectedly cut in the middle by the Qingyue sword. The Qingyue sword did not stop, piercing directly into the neck of the third-layer sword cultivator of Qi refining. The Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator exclaimed in shock, "You're using a magical tool." When he saw the attack of the Qingyue sword, he panicked and admitted defeat. Xiaobizi withdrew his Qingyue sword and walked slowly down the arena. Lu Yun saw Xiaobizi's face turn pale and knew that he was the cause of excessive mana consumption. He quickly supported his arm to prevent him from falling. "You're really amazing, you're really unexpected." Xiaobizi's pale face showed no trace of a smile. He just glared at Lu Yun, took out a bottle of magic restoring pill from his storage bag, took out one, swallowed it, and sat cross-legged, ignoring Lu Yun's teasing. Lu Yun knew that the pill that Xiaobizi swallowed just now was used to restore mana, and each of these pills was worth 3 lower-grade spirit stones. What a waste! Lu Yun thought to himself, if it were him, he would definitely not consume this pill at an unimportant time, but would use it during wartime. Now as long as he meditates to regulate his breath, his mana will slowly recover. 10 days later, the first round of the competition will be over. Lu Yun and his team have ushered in a second draw. This time, Lu Yun and Xiaobizi drew 763 and 864 respectively. Lu Yun is quite satisfied with the numbers he has drawn, at least he can observe the level of other players. 8 days later, it was Lu Yun's turn to compete. Fortunately, Lu Yun also faced off against a second-level cultivator of Qi refining. This makes Lu Yun feel fortunate. Now he has the reward, and if he wins another game, the reward will be even more generous. In the second round of the competition, Lu Yun made many appearances and watched many matches. In the second level of Qi refining, except for a few extremely special cultivators, the other players had similar levels of proficiency. He was fighting against a young man named Zhiyong, who was close in age, but the only difference was that he had a handsome face that captivated women, with long hair draped over his shoulders. He was dressed in white and silver shoes, with a long sword inserted upside down in his back. He stood there, giving people a feeling of elegance and freedom. Lu Yun's evaluation of him is, pretending to fart. Start. As the host's voice sounded, Zhiyong flew out his flying sword, and Lu Yun had also thrown out 4 stones. Lu Yun, beat this kid to death. Little Bizi also annoyed Zhiyong with his pretentious attire. It's so noisy. Zhiyong frowned and looked at Xiaobizi under the stage with disgust. Lu Yun felt that Zhiyong had a sense of danger, which came from deep within and made him feel a bit uneasy. What are you looking at? If you have the guts to fight me, I will definitely beat you to the ground looking for teeth. Xiaobizi pointed at Zhiyong and cursed loudly. Zhiyong's face turned pale with anger from Xiaobizi. A proud person like him would never have experienced such anger before. Staring intently at Xiaobizi, Liu Yun smiled slightly at the corner of his mouth. This was an opportunity, created by Xiaobizi. A stone flew away quickly. Ziyong quickly realized and shouted, "Despicable." As the flying sword returned to defense, Liu Yun could only be heard shouting, "Explode." The stone that flew close burst open in an instant. The surroundings were shrouded in white mist, and it was the secret weapon, Powder Stone, that Liu Yun had prepared for this competition. Ziyong was blinded by the white mist, and his heart couldn't help but panic. The flying sword kept rotating, protecting his body. A flying needle silently approached Ziyong and slowly pressed against his throat. A cold intent seeps into the throat of Ziyong. It also has a slight pain. Liu Yun's voice reached his ear and he said, "Don't move, move again, your flying needle will penetrate your throat." Ziyong broke out in a cold sweat all over his body, and as expected, he didn't move any further. He looked for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, fearing that the flying needle against his throat would penetrate his throat. At this moment, an iron rod appeared in Liu Yun's hand. The iron rod danced in the air, and in a moment, Ziyong suffered multiple injuries on his head and body, with bloodstains everywhere. Ziyong was extremely angry and fainted. Liu Yunsheng. The voice of the host during the construction period sounded, and Liu Yun stepped off the arena. "Liu Yun, that's great. It's really soothing." Xiaobizi rushed over with one swift step, but before anyone arrived, his voice rang out. "You really enjoyed beating up that grandson, it's so soothing." Xiaobizi said with a beaming expression. At this moment, Ziyong woke up and happened to hear Xiaobizi's voice. He spat out a mouthful of blood and shouted angrily at the two of them, "You're despicable. Shameless. You're so despicable." Liu Yun and Xiaobizi both snorted and turned their heads, ignoring Ziyong's roar. Upon seeing this, Ziyong became even more angry and offered his flying sword, shouting at Liu Yun, "Liu Yun, do you dare to compete with me in the arena? Do you dare to win against me based on your own abilities, rather than relying on despicable and shameless tricks?" Liu Yun's face changed greatly. This is a blatant humiliation. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Xiaobizi wielding his sword and the two swords clashing with a click sound. Xiaobizi's flying sword was undamaged, while Ziyong's flying sword was broken in two. "Is your flying sword a magical tool?" Ziyong asked in surprise. "Why, do we still have a competition?" Xiaobizi said proudly. Ziyong's heart sank, and if it were a flying sword of the same level, he would not be afraid of him. But if the other party uses the magic weapon flying sword, that's different. So Ziyong left. After Liu Yun picked up Ziyong's two short swords and put them into the storage bag, Xiaobizi said, "Why are you picking up his junk? I'm not like you. There are many magical tools, and I can still use his broken sword after repairing it," Liu Yun said. Chapter 6. Martial Arts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Liu Yun, look at the first arena. Xiaobizi touched Liu Yun with his hand and said. Liu Yun looked towards the first arena and saw two cultivators about to compete. To their surprise, one of them turned out to be a first-level qi refining player, while his opponent was already a second-level qi refining cultivator. In the second round, there were not many players from the first layer of gas refining, as they were mostly eliminated in the first round of the competition. What's strange about this? In the first round, it's very common for two qi refining players to meet. Liu Yun was puzzled by Xiaobizi's surprised behavior. If the first round of the first-tier gas refining player also encountered a second-tier player, Xiaobizi looked at Liu Yun meaningfully, then you should watch this game carefully. Oh. You watched his game? Liu Yun asked curiously. Xiaobizi nodded and said, that first-layer qi refining player performed very well. You can watch for yourself later. Liu Yun glanced at Xiaobizi and then focused on the arena. As the sound of "start" sounded, the two people on the arena took action simultaneously. The second-level Qi refining player uses a wind blade to activate, while the first-level Qi refining cultivator holds a long wooden stick and wears bear clothes with a bald head. The wind blade passed by, and the bear head in plain clothes remained calm and composed, with feet stepping on yin and yang, and the body swaying unsteadily. Subsequently, he used a long stick from bottom to top, with the tip of the stick pointing towards the abdomen of the second-level Qi refining player. The player was in a panic, and the next wind blade was stopped by Xingsheng. However, if his abdomen was hit by the tip of the stick, his dantian would not be injured. He took a step back and dodged the tip of the stick, but at the same time fell into the wind. The experience of bare-headed combat in plain clothes looks very rich. After failing a single hit, he turned around and poked the other end of the wooden stick directly at the chest of the second-level Qi refining player, with a coherent and seamless movement. The players on the second level of gas refining have repeatedly retreated to the edge of the arena. At this moment, Su Yi jumped up with her bare head, holding a stick in both hands, and threw it at the second-level Qi refining player. He let out a loud shout, his voice shaking the soul. But the second-level Qi refining player was not willing to be knocked off the ring like this, and his right hand once again triggered the wind blade, resisting the bear head in a mutually destructive manner. The bear head in plain clothes in the air cannot avoid the wind blade, and can only resist with a wooden stick. The wooden stick penetrates the wind blade, and its momentum does not diminish. After landing, he turned around in the air and kicked his legs towards the body of the second-level Qi refining player, ultimately causing the second-level Qi refining player to fall below the arena. Ho Dingsheng. The host's voice rang out. So this guy's name is Ho Ding. Lu Yun silently remembered the name Ho Ding. What do you think of the name of this monkey's buttocks? Little Bizi asked proudly. You're such a wicked kid, your speech is damaging enough. Lu Yun patted Xiaobizi's head. This name is easy to remember. Xiaobizi said nonchalantly. Lu Yun thought of the martial arts of the secular world and said, he should be using the martial arts of the secular world. Martial arts. I've heard of it, but it's not very practical, said Xiaobizi. Oh. Is it because none of the opponents are sword cultivators? Lu Yun asked. Yes, haven't you seen that Ho Ding is using an ordinary wooden stick? Xiaobizi asked in response, in the cultivation world, the strength of a cultivator depends on multiple aspects such as his realm, his own martial arts, and treasures. Although Ho Ding has won his opponent at the first level of Qi refining, none of his opponents are sword cultivators. If he encounters a player with half-magical weapons, he will definitely lose. As the number of viewing sessions increased, Lu Yun began to understand the meaning of what Xiaobizi said. It was Xiaobizi's turn to compete on the stage, and Lu Yun jokingly said to him, don't encounter players from the third level of Qi refining again. Good luck to you. Xiaobizi didn't look back, just raised his hands and waved, and walked onto the arena. Xiaobizi had good luck this time, and his opponent was only a player of the same level. Lu Yun glanced at Xiaobizi's opponent and felt relieved. The opponent was also a sword cultivator, but the flying sword was a half-magical weapon, which posed no threat to Xiaobizi. Sure enough, a few rounds later, the opponent's flying sword was cut off by the Qingyue sword, and the opponent admitted defeat. A few days later, the second round of competition has ended. Now draw lots again. Lu Yun has drawn 219 numbers, and Xiaobizi has drawn 242 numbers. The quality of the third round of the competition has significantly improved, and Lu Yun's opponent is a second-tier player from the Qi refining team. The opponent first fired a flying sword, and then a half-magical shield. Lu Yun sighed inwardly about the other party's wealth, and the players who entered the third round were not ordinary people. Lu Yun offered 6 stones, each the size of a fist. Urgent. The opponent's flying sword attacked, and Lu Yun's figure was ghostly and his footwork was elusive. 6 stones roared away at the same time. Stop! The opponent's shield covers their entire body. The shield of this half-magic weapon, let alone 6 stones, even 6 iron blocks, can't be broken. Explosion. 3 stones burst open, and the powder spread everywhere. Liu Yun immediately closed his eyes and examined with his divine sense. The second-level alchemist was fascinated by the powder and dared not open it, so they could only retreat. Explosion. 3 more stones burst open, and the powder grew more and more. Helpless, the second-level gas refining player continued to retreat. Suddenly, he stopped walking backwards. I give up. The audience was very confused and didn't understand why the second-level chi refining player suddenly gave up. Although the powder interferes with the line of sight, it's not enough to give up. Only Liu Yun, the second-floor gas refining player, and the Foundation construction period host are the most clear about the reasons. Originally, when the second-level gas refining player stopped retreating, Liu Yun had already sent out the flying needle. However, considering that even the flying needle of a half-magic weapon could not break through the opponent's shield, Liu Yun used the powder stone to continuously explode, producing powder to confuse the opponent. At the same time, the flying needle had already wrapped around the opponent's back and remained stationary. As long as the opponent retreats to the flying needle can accurately control the opponent. In this competition, Xiaobizi's opponent was another player from the third level of chi refining. Although it was very difficult, he had the Qingyue sword in his hand and used a half-magic shield for the first time, which made it difficult for him to win. The 4th round of the competition has started, and most of the players in this round are from the third level of gas refining, while there are very few players from the second level of gas refining. But the most surprising thing is that there is also a player who has the ability to refine qi, and that is Sui Bald Ho Ding, who possesses martial arts skills. Liu Yun looked at Ho Ding and secretly marveled at the uniqueness of this athlete. Then, he took out a long stick from the storage bag and handed it to Ho Ding. This is the semi-magical long staff that he has invited Xiaobizi to forge at Zhang Bo's place in the past few days. Although Xiaobizi didn't understand, Liu Yun didn't explain too much. He was very grateful for Zhang Bo's help in his heart, as he had created a set of flying needles and half-magic weapons and a long stick for himself. If placed outside, it would be worth a lot of spirit stones, but Zhang Bo didn't take a penny for Xiaobizi's sake. Liu Yun deeply remembers it in his heart. As for the relationship between Xiaobizi and Zhang Bo, Liu Yun did not ask, but he knew that Xiaobizi must have agreed to Zhang Bo's terms for his own sake. Since the last free creation of the flying needle, it has been incredibly smooth to create the half-magic tool long staff again, and Zhang Bo's attitude towards himself has also improved significantly. This is for you, Liu Yun said calmly. Ho Ding was a bit puzzled, he didn't believe that there would be a good thing of pie falling from the sky. You can't advance to the next round with this wooden stick, using this half-magic tool can improve your level of performance, Liu Yun explained. Why help me? Ho Ding still asked very puzzled. There's no reason, I'm optimistic about you, don't let me down, Liu Yun said before turning around and leaving. Ho Ding looked at Liu Yun's distant figure and said in a voice that he could only hear himself, thank you. This game may be a turning point in Ho Ding's life. He didn't expect a stranger to help him so much. And all of this stems from the long stick of that half-magic tool. He knew that this was the opportunity he needed to exchange with hard work and sweat in the future. Although he couldn't express his gratitude for Liu Yun's help in words, he silently recorded this kindness in his heart. He knew that if given the opportunity in the future, he would definitely do his best to repay the person who had helped him before. The opponent of Liu Yun is a Qi refining 3-layer sword cultivator, which is the highest level player he has ever encountered. Unlike Xiaobizi's effortless journey through the levels, the third-level Qi refining player has already encountered 2. Liu Yun stared at his opponent, 6 stones hanging around him. The opponent's gaze froze and they stopped talking nonsense. The half-magic weapon flying sword rushed from mid-air and directly took Lu Yun's head. Lu Yun did not show any panic, but used the body movements taught by the old sweeper to dodge flexibly. As the flying sword roared, his figure shuttled non-stop. Although his clothes were scratched by the blade, he couldn't even touch his collar in the end. The three-layer alchemist's nose exuded tiny beads of sweat. Subsequently, 3 stones exploded simultaneously, and the arena was filled with powder. Faced with this scene, he was already prepared and immediately closed his eyes and released his divine consciousness. Lu Yun was not affected by this and continued to launch 6 flying needles according to plan, attacking the opponent in 5 different directions, while the other one was hidden beside him waiting for the opportunity to move. This series of actions caused the opponent to be flustered. Despite the flying sword's defense, 3 flying needles still shot into their body. The excruciating pain caused the opponent to abandon their flying sword and roll endlessly on the arena. He lost. With the referee's plain voice, the game ended. Lu Yun withdrew the flying needles that had been shot into the opponent's body one by one. After the opponent stopped rolling, he slowly stood up and looked at Lu Yun with a fearful gaze. After Lu Yun walked off the arena expressionlessly, the previously indifferent referee showed an unusual gaze. At this moment, Lu Yun had already walked up to Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi smiled at him and handed Lu Yun a bag of Jinyuan San. Lu Yun took Jinyuan San, which is a pill for restoring physical strength. Although not as good as the pill taken by Xiaobizi, it is still quite good. He didn't take it immediately, but put it in a storage bag and sat cross-legged to start meditating. "You don't need to return me, kid." Little Beezy's grinding voice came from beside Lu Yun's ear, but Lu Yun tightly grasped the storage bag, looking as if he wouldn't let go. "You still have a lot of Jinyuan powder, I'll keep it for future use," Lu Yun said as he grabbed onto the storage bag. Xiaobizi felt helpless about this and eventually gave up. Xiaobizi once again defeated his opponent with a Qingyue sword and a half-magic weapon shield, as expected. This made Lu Yun deeply realize the importance of magic tools to himself, and also made him yearn to have a true magic tool. The 4th round of the competition has ended, and Lu Yun and Xiaobizi will welcome a new round of drawing. In the 5th round of the competition, only over 600 people were left to participate, including the first-layer cultivator Ho Ding. It seems that he has obtained the half-magic weapon stick and his strength has improved. "Xiaobizi, I want to ask you a question." "Speak up, I'll listen." "If a cultivator like Ho Ding has martial arts skills and wants to practice spells in the future, which cultivation method is more suitable?" After pondering for a moment, Xiaobizi replied, "For a cultivator who has mastered martial arts so proficiently, if they want to practice spells in the future, it is best to choose either the body refining technique or the technique that excels in speed. Both of these can showcase their strengths." After thinking for a while, Lu Yun asked again, "If you were him, which one would you choose between body refining and speed?" "If my weapon is a sharp weapon, I would choose speed. Use speed to drive the weapon against the enemy. But if I use a stick, it's better to refine my body, with greater strength and defense," said Xiaobizi, looking at Lu Yun strangely. "Why are you asking this, kid? You don't want to help him find a body refining technique, do you?" Lu Yun pretended not to know and then said, "Are we friends?" Xiaobizi stepped back and shook his head, saying, "Of course not a friend. It's unlucky to be your friend." Without looking back, he turned around and ran. Sigh, sigh, sigh. After calling several times, Lu Yun saw that Xiaobizi was nowhere to be found and could only helplessly shake his head and sigh. Xiaobizi ultimately did not escape Lu Yun's magic palm, and used 500 points of contribution to exchange a body refining technique for Ho Ding. The first layer of the 9 heavens of quenching body. According to Xiaobizi, this cultivation technique was once written by an elder of the Immortal Sword sect, with a total of 9 levels, each level divided into 9 layers. If practiced until the late stage of the 9th level, the body can be as strong and powerful as a magic weapon, invincible in all directions. Because it was written by the Supreme Elder, external disciples can exchange their contribution for the first 3 layers of the first layer, while the remaining layers need to be exchanged in the internal sect. 500 points of contribution made Xiaobizi feel heartbroken, but Liu Yun promised to repay him an extra 100 points after receiving the reward, so Xiaobizi happily agreed. When Liu Yun handed the first layer of the quenched 9 heavens, after rubbing to Ho Ding's eyes showed joy and he simply said to Liu Yun, "Thank you," before turning around and leaving. Xiaobizi, who was standing by, wanted to jump up and scold Ho Ding, but was stopped by Liu Yun. "Did that kid just say thank you? It's too inhumane, isn't it? We've done everything we could to help him, so it's okay to say thank you more," Liu Yun said. "Thank you." Liu Yun patted Xiaobizi's shoulder and turned to leave. Xiaobizi looked in the direction of Liu Yun's departure and said, "Why are you all looking like this?" In the 5th and 6th rounds, Liu Yun, Xiaobizi, and Ho Ding all passed 2 rounds, but the process was very difficult. The rules of the 7th round of the competition have changed. Among 150 people, there are 15 people in each of the 10 arena. The first 5 people will be eliminated, and the remaining 10 people will automatically advance. The last place will be in the top 10. Liu Yun was assigned to the 6th arena, with Xiaobizi and Ho Ding in the 3rd and 5th arenas respectively. The competition begins. Explosion. Liu Yun quickly sent out 8 stones and exploded them simultaneously, leaving powder scattered all over the arena. He unleashed his divine sense, wielding an iron rod, and attacked his blinded opponent. Other contestants also offered flying swords and used various spell skills from the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. For a moment, the arena where Liu Yun was located became chaotic. Soon someone fell off the arena, and Liu Yun's side was also in danger. A flying sword almost pierced through his head, but fortunately Liu Yun had a powerful divine sense and a ghostly body technique able to avoid danger every time. A sword finger shot out, and a 3rd-tier chi refining player was hit in the abdomen, blood gushing out, and he was eliminated. Another flying needle shot out, and a chi refining 3-layer sword cultivator was hit in the neck, falling to the ground and screaming in agony. Liu Yun doesn't know how many opponents he has eliminated. Shuttling through the powder, the flying needle continuously shot out. After the powder dissipated, he exploded again and again. In the misty powder, Liu Yun constantly urged his magic. 8 flying needles kept shuttling through the crowd, and he felt a dazed state, as if watching the old sweeper waving his broom had made him realize the feeling. He can clearly see the flying swords and spells of each opponent, which is extremely clear in their divine consciousness. This also exposed the weaknesses of his opponent, allowing his finger sword to exert greater power. A sense of danger alerted Liu Yun, and a blue flying sword appeared in his mind flying towards him. Although unable to dodge, Liu Yun decided to turn around and attack. At the moment when the flying sword pierced his body, he turned to his side again, and the flying sword pierced through his clothes and flew away. The crisis of life and death gave Liu Yun a profound insight, and a hot current surged out of the dantian, spreading to his limbs and bones. His mana has doubled more than twice. This feeling made him realize that he had broken through to the 3rd level of gas refining. At this point, only he and another player controlling the blue flying sword remained on the arena. The powder has gradually disappeared. Liu Yun stopped his explosive behavior because he knew that this tactic was no longer useful to his opponent. Interestingly, you broke through on the arena. You're very strong, but I like it. Chapter 7. Liu Bojiang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. In a fierce battle, the only remaining chi refining 3-layer sword cultivator tightly grasped the blue flying sword in his hand, and the sword body shimmered with a cold light. He stood in the field, his gaze fixed, like a fierce tiger about to pounce on its prey. Remember, my name is Liu Bojiang, he declared loudly, his voice echoing in the air. That majestic momentum was like a flash flood that suddenly struck. The blue flying sword, carrying a stronger blue mist, struck like a lightning bolt. Lu Yun felt the pressure of this momentum and his face changed slightly. He clearly felt the powerful force carried by this sword, which was like a raging wind and waves, making it impossible for him to take the sword no matter what. His heart was beating faster, his blood was boiling, and he knew it was an opponent he couldn't resist. Explosive! Lu Yun shouted decisively, while detonating the 4 stones in his hand. However, the diffuse powder appeared so fragile in front of the blue sword energy, and a long gap was cut open, exposing Lu Yun completely under the sword energy. The blue flying sword had already swung towards him, and Lu Yun did not flinch, facing it head-on. At this moment of life and death, he took a step to the left with his left foot, twisted his body strangely, and dodged the sword from an unimaginable angle. At the same time, the 8 flying needles in his hand flew together towards Liu Bojiang. Each flying needle accurately pierces different parts of Liu Bojiang, with different directions. Drink! Liu Bojiang didn't panic when facing the attack of the flying needle. He shouted loudly, clenched his sword handle with both hands, and struck again. This time, the sword energy was even stronger than before, like a thunderbolt in heaven and earth, instantly crushing the flying needle. Chi! After hitting Liu Bojiang, the 8 flying needles were all blocked by his vigorous energy, unable to move forward by half an inch. Lu Yun's face turned pale, and he realized that his opponent was not a simple chi-refining 3-layer sword cultivator, but a body-refining cultivator. His method of protecting the body with vigorous chi renders his attacks completely ineffective. The second wave of sword energy has arrived again, and Lu Yun has successfully dodged it again with his wonderful body and footwork. He became increasingly proficient in dodging, and each insight deepened his understanding of body movements and footwork. The 3rd sword, the 4th sword, the 5th sword. Lu Yun doesn't know how many swords he has dodged. Every avoidance is like a meditation, deepening his understanding of himself. His body movements are like the wind, unpredictable, the gait is like water, smooth and natural. With the passage of time, Liu Bojiang's magical power has gradually weakened, and the strength of each sword is weaker than the previous sword. However, Lu Yun did not seize the opportunity to counterattack. He knows that this is his battle against the strong, and every attack requires full effort. Your body technique is very good, I don't know your name. Liu Bojiang stopped attacking and asked Lu Yun. Lu Yun replied with a serious expression, Lu Yun. I, Liu Bojiang, didn't expect to fight against opponents who have broken through to the same level as me for so long. He deserves my respect. To show my appreciation, I will compete with all my strength. After hearing this, Lu Yun thought to himself, don't value me. However, he was still amazed that the other party has not yet shown all their strength. My flying sword is called Blue Spirit. Although it is not a magic weapon, it is considered the top level among half-magic weapons. If some extreme materials are added, it can be upgraded to a magic weapon. If you defeat me, this Blue Spirit flying sword will be yours. Lu Yun thought to himself, can this half-magic weapon still be upgraded to a magic weapon? Your flying needle can also be upgraded to a magic weapon if appropriate materials are added. While Lu Yun was secretly calculating his flying needle, he heard Liu Bojiang continue to say, the swordsmanship technique I used in the battle with you just now is called the first move of the residual falling sword. Now that I'm going to use the second move, you need to be careful. As soon as the words fell, Liu Bojiang's long sword in his hand instantly turned into a shadow, with the tip of the sword pointing towards Lu Yun. Swordsmanship emanated from the blade, as if it was about to sever the entire arena. Lu Yun immediately responded with concentration, knowing that it was the opponent's full blow. Although I was somewhat surprised that the opponent could remain calm in such an attack, I still admired their combat skills more. He quickly moved his body and cleverly dodged the attacks of sword energy. At the same time, his hands quickly formed imprints, and 8 flying needles spun rapidly in his hands. Lin, Bing, Do, Zhe, All, Formation, Lai, Zai, Front. Liu Yun murmured in a low voice, and the flying needle rushed towards Liu Bojiang as it murmured. At the same time, Liu Bojiang heard a sound of explosion in his ear, and the powder produced by the explosion of 8 stones filled the arena. Here's another move. Liu Bojiang felt very depressed in his heart. Although Liu Bojiang has achieved a basic level in body refining, his mana was almost exhausted just now, and his protective energy could no longer withstand the attacks of the 8 flying needles. He relied solely on himself to resist the flying needles, and his body refining had not yet reached that level. He retracted his flying sword in mid-air and handed it over to his hands. His magic was in motion, and his body was like a spinning top, forming a spiral airflow around his body that dispersed the powder, while the 8 flying needles were blocked by the spiral airflow. Liu Yun also knew that if he activated his magic, he could break through the spiral airflow, but if his half-magic weapon flying needle collided with the blue spirit sword, it would also be destroyed. For Liu Bojiang's defense, Liu Yun is already powerless, but if he cultivates his spiritual cultivation technique to the level of divine sting, he can launch a surprise attack on his divine sense in this situation. But now it's useless to say anything. Cultivating to the divine stab can only be done after refining 3 layers of qi. I just advanced on the arena, and being able to break through the 3 layers of qi refining is probably due to the contribution of the old sweeper who taught me body techniques. The body technique of the old sweeper. Liu Yun's mind flashed with a thought. He took out an iron rod from his storage bag and waved it in his hand, as if it were in his hand or hanging outside his hand. Liu Bojiang felt relieved to attack when he saw Liu Yun retracting the flying needle. The blue spirit sword hovers in the air, constantly attacking with cuts, spikes, cuts, and picks. Liu Yun also maximized his physique and occasionally participated in attacks with an iron rod. Although Liu Yun's moves were mysterious, the iron rod in his hand was only made of ordinary wrought iron. He kept avoiding the touch of the blue spirit sword and slowly fell into a disadvantage. Liu Bojiang seized this point and the blue spirit sword flew wildly around Liu Yun. Liu Yun's shirt and robe were already in a state of disrepair. A sword flickered with blue light, and Liu Yun couldn't dodge, leaving a bloody wound on his left arm. But at this moment, Liu Yun was very close to Liu Bojiang, and the pain disappeared from Liu Yun's face in an instant, replaced by a smile. He bent his finger and flicked a sword energy from his fingertips, directly hitting Liu Bojiang's chest. This pointed sword came quickly, and Liu Bojiang couldn't have avoided it at the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. He was taken aback, but it was too late. With a hissing sound, the sword pierced through his shoulder blades and penetrated deep into his skin. Liu Bo spewed out a mouthful of blood from the mouth of the river, but the blue spirit sword still did not stop. It turned around and flew towards Liu Yun again. Although Liu Yun was already powerless to dodge, he knew he couldn't panic at this moment. He took a deep breath and then said in a deep voice, "I admit defeat." Upon hearing this sentence, the blue spirit sword abruptly came to an end an inch around Liu Yun's neck. This competition was extremely thrilling, and both sides used all their might. In the end, although Liu Yun lost the competition, his courage and perseverance won the praise of the cultivators below the stage. And Liu Bojiang's performance is even more admirable. You are really outstanding. Even without any suitable weapons, you can still cause damage to me, which shows your true strength and talent. You deserve my deep respect. However, in this competition, your half-magic weapon flying needle still has some shortcomings in use. Liu Yun heard Liu Bojiang's evaluation of his game and his expression suddenly became focused. He took a deep breath and humbly continued to ask. Brother Liu, please teach me. The characteristic of the flying needle is its surprise, which is mainly concealed, rapid, and sudden attack. If you can hide it in the dark and always prepare to ambush me, I will always be in a passive position and have to allocate some energy to guard against you. You hurt me this time because of your unexpected use, which made me think you have exhausted all means, but I did not expect you to have a deadly killing move. If I guess correctly, you must have learned a swordsmanship, but you kept it for the most critical moment and used it to defeat the enemy in one fell swoop. Liu Bojiang analyzed calmly and thoughtfully. Chapter 8. Viewing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lu Yun was amused in his heart. He used his swordsmanship to the end, but he had just learned how to use the finger sword and was unable to fully utilize it. He thought it could be his trump card, but he didn't expect it to have the desired effect. However, Lu Yun's impression of Liu Bojiang has improved. Although he is somewhat conceited, he does have the capital to be conceited. After the competition, he was able to sincerely point out his shortcomings, and such a person is still worth interacting with. Lu Yun scanned towards other arenas and found that except for 2 arenas still in progress, all other arenas had already ended. He secretly sighed in his heart that the strength of these contestants was really getting stronger and stronger. Soon, those 2 arenas also came to an end. Now there is a person standing on each arena, and they are about to have their final showdown. Lu Yun is also looking forward to the upcoming competition and hopes to see more exciting competitions. Among the final winners was Chai Chang, whom he had seen before, while Xiaobizi and Ho Ding had already been eliminated. Lu Yun suddenly turned his head and saw a familiar figure rushing over. It was Xiaobizi. Behind him followed a figure, which was Ho Ding. Before Lu Yun could ask, Xiaobizi was like opening a conversation box and chattering incessantly. Lu Yun, do you know? The Qingyue sword in my hand shone brightly in this battle, and there were countless opponents who were kicked off the arena by me. Xiaobizi said excitedly as he gestured his hand. Lu Yun interrupted him and asked, how did you lose later? Xiaobizi sighed and said, I'm really unlucky. I've encountered a pervert who can't even beat him. He can kill me with just one fireball spell. Lu Yun smiled and said, Xiaobizi, you're just too impatient. Even low-level spells like fireball can defeat you. You need to be careful in the future. Xiaobizi smiled awkwardly, but still said unwillingly, you don't understand. That swordsman's fireball technique is truly indescribable. I have never seen anyone who can cultivate fireball techniques to this level. Lu Yun ignored Xiaobizi and looked at Ho Ding, asking, so, which sword cultivator did you lose to? Ho Ding replied, I'm not quite sure about the specific situation of a very strong sword cultivator. Lu Yun didn't ask further, but Xiaobizi interjected, if I were to come across that sword cultivator, with my Qingyue sword, I would definitely be able to beat him so that his parents wouldn't even know him. Lu Yun interrupted Xiaobizi's words and said with a smile, all right, come on, stop bragging. Look at the start of the sequential competition below. Lu Yun said, looking in the direction of the sequential competition, his eyes flickering with anticipation and excitement. At this point, the qualifying round for the remaining 10 people has already begun. 10 people stood on our arena, the atmosphere tense and solemn. The sound of the beginning sounded, and the 10-person melee officially began. Lu Yun's gaze was fixed on the field, his gaze wandering between the 10 people, observing their movements and expressions. He noticed that Xiaobizi was also paying attention to the game, with anticipation and nervousness in his eyes. Lu Yun, who do you think is the most powerful among the 10 of them? Xiaobizi suddenly asked with a hint of nervousness and excitement in his voice. Lu Yun smiled slightly and looked at Xiaobizi's curious eyes. He replied, I haven't seen anyone else, but I know that Chai Chang and Liu Bojiang, who fought against me, should be very strong. But to say who is the strongest, it depends on their respective performances. In my opinion, the cultivator who uses fireball magic against me should be the most powerful. He is not only skilled, but also has a powerful fireball magic as a weapon. Chai Chang is probably not his opponent. Xiaobizi's tone was full of admiration. Lu Yun nodded slightly to show understanding. He didn't expect Xiaobizi to value the fireball art cultivator so much. After a moment of silence, he replied, "Oh. Is that right? That cultivator is really impressive." This game seemed to have caught all his attention, and Lu Yun's eyes flickered with light. He seemed to have seen the intense battle scene in the field. The noise and cheers around seemed to have disappeared, leaving only the figures and movements of the 10 people on the arena. Lu Yun looked towards the arena, with a hint of nervousness and anticipation in his eyes. He saw that 8 out of 10 people were sword cultivators. He frowned slightly and whispered, "Ho Ding, who defeated you?" "It was the sword cultivator with blue hair who defeated me," Ho Ding replied. Sure enough, among the 10 people, there was a blue-haired sword cultivator with a flying sword wrapped around his body. It seemed that he did not intend to take the initiative to attack, but rather to defend. Lu Yun's gaze turned to Liu Bojiang and Chai Chang, who were attacking their opponents with all their might. Their belief is to attack, and every move is full of strength and determination. Others, on the other hand, act according to the situation on the field and make corresponding responses. Lu Yun looked at Liu Bojiang and Chai Chang, their opponents holding magic shields. Every time they faced an attack from the blue spirit sword, this swordsman could easily block it with his shield, and from time to time, a flying sword above his head would also participate in the attack. Judging from his movements, the level of the magic shield should not be low. Although the blue spirit sword is a top-notch semi-magical weapon, it does not cause any damage when struck on the magic shield. Xiaobizi, you are a knowledgeable person. What weapon is that magic shield? Lu Yun suddenly turned his head and said to Xiaobizi beside him. Xiaobizi was immediately refreshed when asked such a question by Lu Yun. He fixed his gaze and saw that among the 10 people, only the one wearing a brown robe was holding a magic shield, and Lu Yun must be referring to the magic shield in his hand. After observing for a while, Xiaobizi said, "This magic shield is very unusual. I bet it should be a lower-grade magic weapon." "Are you so certain?" Lu Yun's eyes revealed some confusion. "Although I am just an ordinary alchemist, I have been accustomed to these weapons since I was young. With just a few glances, I can tell their level," said Xiaobizi seriously. "Okay, I believe you." Lu Yun stopped asking further, but he firmly believed in Xiaobizi's judgment. At this moment, the 10 people on the arena were already fighting fiercely. The cultivator mentioned by Xiaobizi was dressed in yellow clothes, with slender eyebrows, slightly round eyes, and a lively spirit. He spread out his palm, and the fireball kept flying out of his hand, as if it were a puppet sending fireballs. Every fireball was urged by him to emit astonishing speed, with extremely short intervals, as if an invisible thread was pulling them. The person attacked by the fireball is a sword cultivator, wielding a flying sword in his hand like an aerial dancer. Although the flying sword scattered the fireballs, the number and speed of the fireballs were too many, and the swordsman's robe and eyebrows were burnt black, looking extremely disheveled. At this moment, the cultivator who cast the fireball spell silently recited a spell, and a huge fireball was triggered from the cultivator's hand. The power and speed of the fireball surprised people. Suddenly, the fighting cultivator was hit by the fireball and let out a scream, rolling back and leaving the arena. A figure quickly appeared on the arena, swept by the strong wind and extinguished the flames of sword cultivation. Afterwards, the person took out a pill and fed it into Jian Xiu's mouth. The sword cultivator's expression softened just now. He saw that the person who saved him was the elder Tian Kai in charge of hosting this time. The fireball cultivator did not continue to participate in the battle, but took out a pack of true yuan powder from the storage bag and poured it into his mouth. His body slowly recovered, and there was not much excitement in his expression, as if everything was under his control. At this moment, only 8 people were still fighting on the field, their expressions varied, some full of confidence, some extremely nervous, some glaring angrily, and some with pale faces. And the cultivator who cast the fireball, like a bystander, stood quietly on the side, waiting for the next opportunity to appear. Not to mention, his fireball skills are really impressive, much stronger than all the fireball skills I have ever seen, Liu Yun said in a low voice with a look of admiration on his face. After hearing this, Xiaobizi smiled proudly, with a look of confidence as a winner in his eyes. He said, "Look, I'm right. Those who can defeat me are definitely not ordinary people." Liu Yun nodded, stopped talking, and continued to focus on watching the game. The person Chai Chang was facing was also a sword cultivator. The two had fought hundreds of times, and only saw sword light swirling, sword light shining, and figures swaying. Xiaobizi squinted his eyes as he watched the match, unable to help but marvel at the extraordinary strength of these two people. Liu Yun sighed to himself on the side, saying that it was not easy for Chai Chang to fight against his opponent. Being able to fight for so long without falling behind showed that the strength of the remaining few people on the arena was not ordinary. The strength they have demonstrated is also shocking. Then, Xiaobizi saw the person who defeated Ho Ding again, and he became even more fierce. I saw the sword in his hand suddenly transform into 3 handles, forming an unknown sword formation. The blue-haired sword cultivates or attacks or defends in an orderly manner. The other party was not careful and was stabbed in the arm by one of the swords. If it weren't for the mercy of the blue-hair sword cultivator, he might have been disabled. Another person was eliminated, and from then on, the 9th and 10th places were formed, said Xiaobizi with a playful smile. He looked at the eliminated person with a slightly raised corner of his mouth, revealing a sly smile. His voice was filled with excitement and anticipation, as if cheering for his victory. Zhaozuiyuan.com. The heavy-eyebrowed and round-eyed cultivator who wielded the fireball technique glanced at the blue-haired sword cultivator who had just won, with a slight curl of his mouth and a provocative expression. Then, his figure suddenly flashed like a lightning bolt across the night sky. Fireballs were continuously ignited, and hot flames condensed like a small sun. These fireballs emit a strong light, and flames jump in the air, as spectacular as a scene of raging flames. Each fireball carries astonishing power, charging towards the newly victorious blue-haired sword cultivator like a beast. The blue-haired sword cultivator who had just won was now filled with fear and helplessness on his face. His mana has not fully recovered yet, and facing this continuously triggered fireball, he couldn't help but panic. I saw him holding 3 flying swords tightly in his hand, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching fireball, and he already had thoughts of despair in his heart. But after all, he is an excellent swordsman who quickly mobilizes the remaining mana. The light on the flying sword flickers, instantly forming a 3-sword formation in the shape of an upper horn. 3 flying swords cut a beautiful arc in the air, tightly connected, forming a solid sword wall. With the start of the sword formation, all the fireballs were blocked outside the airflow formed by the 3-sword formation. These fireballs collided with the sword formation, making crisp sounds before being repelled one by one. Seeing the fireball unable to approach, the blue-haired sword cultivator finally breathed a sigh of relief, and his tense heartstrings finally relaxed slightly. In this duel, both sides fought back and forth, and for a moment neither side could do anything about it. The cultivator with heavy eyebrows and round eyes did not dare to be careless. He knew that although the blue-haired sword cultivator was currently trapped in the fireball, the real battle might have just begun. And this blue-haired sword cultivator is also well aware of the opponent's strength and knows not to take it lightly. The confrontation between the two sides may seem like an end, but the real battle has just begun. Chapter 9. Wudao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, with a hum sound, the blue-haired sword cultivator showed no fear and made no adjustments. The 3 swords merged into one and slashed towards the cultivator who was casting the fireball. This blue-haired sword cultivator's actions are full of confidence, seemingly disdainful of any challenge. Ha! The cultivator who cast the fireball couldn't help but shout at this scene, and then formed a wall of fire in front of him, blocking the attack of the blue-hair sword cultivator. Then, he took a few more steps back and quickly formed a flame phoenix in his hand. The flame phoenix fluttered and jumped in his hand, lifelike, and then pounced fiercely at the blue-hair sword Xiao. The blue-hair sword cultivator is blocked by a fire wall and cannot continue moving forward. However, he did not give up, but quickly dodged the flame phoenix on his side. However, he didn't expect the flame phoenix to follow along, catching him off guard. With a loud bang, the flame phoenix exploded on the blue-hair sword cultivator, and his entire body was immediately surrounded by flames. He fell below the arena, flames rising everywhere, and the scene was very spectacular. Look! It's really not unfair for me to lose to him. Look, even the sword cultivator who defeated Monkey's Nest is not his opponent, which proves that I am much stronger than Monkey's Nest. Xiaobizi pointed at the fireball cultivator and shouted excitedly. However, Ho Ding seemed to completely ignore Xiaobizi's shouting, his gaze indifferent, as if all of this had nothing to do with him. His attention seemed completely focused on the upcoming battle. Lu Yun was somewhat embarrassed by Xiaobizi's excitement. He ignored Xiaobizi's arguments and instead focused on the upcoming competition. Bang! Who could have imagined that at this moment, there would be another deafening roar on the arena? A sword cultivator appears so fragile in front of this broad-backed giant sword. In the midst of swords and shadows, he was not careful and was fiercely shot down by his opponent to the bottom of the arena. And the robust man holding a black broad-backed giant sword, with a beard all over his face and a rainbow-like aura, seemed like an invincible god of war. His knife, made of such mysterious materials, shimmered with light in the sunlight. Who can resist this blow? At the same time, the sword cultivator who was facing off against Chai Chang was also defeated in the midst of lightning and fire. Now, there are only 4 players left on the arena. Among them, the cultivator who unleashed the fireball surprisingly defeated 2 opponents alone, demonstrating astonishing strength and extraordinary wisdom. At this moment, the battle on the arena has also entered a white-hot stage. Liu Bojiang engaged in a fierce battle with the monk holding a magic shield. The shield in his hand seemed to have turned into an unstoppable shield, easily defusing both Liu Bojiang's attacks and defenses. This game is no longer just a competition between strength and magic, but also a competition between wisdom and tactics. Every contestant is giving their all and striving for the ultimate victory. I said Liu Yun, Liu Bojiang didn't do much to defeat you, did he? Xiaobizi sneered at Liu Yun. Liu Yun's gaze remained fixed on Liu Bojiang's struggle, and he said calmly, "What do you know? His strength far surpasses mine." What? How dare you look up to him so much? Little Bizi said in surprise. It's not that I look up to him, but that his strength is indeed very strong, Liu Yun said calmly. If I want to surpass him, I need more cultivation and refinement. What are you still waiting for? Why don't you hurry up and practice? Xiaobizi sneered. I have my own ideas, you don't have to worry, Liu Yun said calmly. I believe that in the near future, I will be even stronger than him. Humph, then you should work hard slowly, Xiaobizi said disdainfully. However, I don't think you can surpass him. Then wait and see, Liu Yun said confidently. At this moment, the battle between the two has entered a white-hot stage. Liu Bojiang's attack was as fierce as a storm, but the magic shield was like an indestructible fortress that could not be broken no matter what kind of attack he used. The sword cultivator holding the magic shield also gave up the attack and focused on defense. For a moment, Liu Bojiang was unable to pose any threat to him. What I hate the most is this kind of turtle shell. Chai Chang watched as the two of them fought incessantly. Suddenly, his flying sword flew upwards, and a powerful force came from the sword body, fiercely attacking the cultivator holding the magic shield. Sword Xiao, holding a magic shield, was attacked from both sides and could only dodge continuously. However, Chai Chang's attack was as fierce as a tide, continuous and relentless. Liu Bojiang also took the opportunity to strengthen his offensive. Puff, Sword Xiao, holding a magic shield, was hit on the back by Chai Chang's sword light, spewing out a mouthful of blood. Helplessly, he glared at Chai Chang fiercely before jumping off the arena. Don't meddle in your own business. Liu Bojiang's self-esteem was hurt and he didn't appreciate it. You're really bad, so I'll give you a hand, Chai Chang said disdainfully. You're looking for death. Liu Bojiang was furious and swung his blue spirit sword towards Chai Chang. Don't you plan to take a break? Chai Chang swung his flying sword and stopped him, half-jokingly saying. I don't even need to rest for someone like you. Liu Bojiang's voice trembled with anger as he was repeatedly insulted. Chai Chang's voice suddenly became cold. Then I'll take you off the arena. The flying sword spiraled towards Liu Bojiang. The cultivator holding a giant sword said to the cultivator who was casting the fireball, they have already started fighting. Let's not idle anymore, let's compete for a point. Exactly, replied the cultivator who cast the fireball. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his right hand and 3 fireballs flew out one after another, hitting the giant sword cultivator. Not bad. The giant swordsman shouted loudly, then swung out his giant sword. A gust of wind howled past, shattering all 3 fireballs. Without hesitation, he swung out his sword with a sharp whistling sound. What kind of sword is this? The fireball cultivator was puzzled to himself, and was shocked by the sound howling brought out by the black sword scraping through the airflow. But before he could think it over, he recited the Dharma and a wall of fire formed in front of him. He took a few more steps back, forming a huge fireball between his hands. When Wudao encountered the wall of fire, he did not block the other party as usual. However, when Wudao touched the wall of fire, it disappeared without a trace. The fireball cultivator was caught off guard by the Wudao cultivator, and in a panic, he activated the incomplete big fireball. However, something strange happened again, and the big fireball disappeared without a trace when it came into contact with the Wudao cultivator. The fireball cultivator was stunned by the scene in front of him, but the black blade approached him without any hindrance and instinctively retreated backwards. However, the blade still scraped onto the fireball cultivator's arm, leaving a bloodstain. If the black blade cultivator hadn't recovered the blade in time, the fireball cultivator's arm might have been cut off. This black knife is strange. Little Bizi seemed to be muttering to himself. What's so strange? Lu Yun asked curiously. Didn't you see that this black sword has the ability to absorb mana? Xiaobizi said with a serious expression. Lu Yun recalled that, as Xiaobizi had said, when Wudao encountered the wall of fire, it suddenly disappeared without a trace. Which of his black swords is more powerful than your Qingyue sword? Lu Yun asked Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi hesitated for a moment and replied, it should be because his black sword is powerful. At least I haven't seen what material his black sword is made of, but at the very least it must be a lower-grade magical tool. Lu Yunqi looked at Xiaobizi strangely and found the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. These words were very strange in Xiaobizi's mouth. You should know that Xiaobizi never admits defeat, and what can make Xiaobizi admire, that black sword must be very extraordinary. The competition between Liu Bojiang and Chai Chang is nearing its end, however, due to Liu Bojiang's insufficient mana, he ultimately lost to Chai Chang. Although Liu Bojiang was somewhat dissatisfied, the gap was still significant compared to the stronger Chai Chang. Chai Chang also paid a painful price in the competition. His flying sword was severely damaged in the collision with the blue spirit sword, with numerous scars that made it unbearable to look directly at. Lu Yun frowned when he saw Chai Chang's flying sword. Obviously, Compared to the black sword, Chai Chang is really at an extreme disadvantage with this broken flying sword, and the possibility of victory is extremely slim. That's it, this Chai Chang must not be able to win first. Xiaobizi also saw Chai Chang's unfavorable situation, and he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Is there really no hope left? Liu Yun couldn't help but wonder in his heart. Xiaobizi shook his head gently and said, unless there is a miracle, it will be difficult for Chai Chang to turn the tables. Liu Yun silently recited in his heart, hoping for a miracle to appear and hoping that Chai Chang could create a miracle and reverse the situation. The Wudao cultivator couldn't help but laugh when he saw Chai Chang's flying sword, while Chai Chang frowned tightly and had no time to respond. This battle is extremely difficult for Chai Chang. His flying sword never dares to collide with the black sword, but its momentum is like the wind and it still hasn't fallen behind. Although the flying sword dared not come into contact with the black sword, every time Chai Chang's flying sword could bring out the sword's sharpness. These sword edges may be called sword edges, but their sharpness is no less than that of a sharp blade passing by. The Wudao cultivator just chuckled, making people feel disgusted from the bottom of their hearts. Every time the sword flash passes and the black sword hits, every time the sword flash comes into contact with the black sword, it will be sucked away by this mysterious black sword without a trace. Chapter 10. Xiaobizi Refiner. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Chai Chang is indeed at a disadvantage in weapons, but I think it's only a matter of time before he loses, said Xiaobizi. However, Liu Yun did not agree with this view. He carefully observed that after absorbing the sword's rays, the face of the Wudao cultivator would appear slightly pale, and his movement speed would also slow down. This kind of change cannot have been unnoticed by Chai Chang in the fierce battle. A glimmer of light flashed in Liu Yun's eyes as he retorted, I don't think so. Chai Chang doesn't lack the ability to fight back, his keen insight is enough to help him seize the opponent's weaknesses. In addition, although the Wudao is powerful, it also has its limitations. If Chai Chang can cleverly use this, he may be able to turn the tide of the battle. Sure enough, as expected by Liu Yun, Chai Chang's sword shards roared in like a storm, and the black swords in the hands of the Wudao cultivator absorbed these shards one after another. However, with the continuous impact of the sword, the face of the Wudao cultivator gradually turned pale. Deng Sunset Sword. Chai Chang shouted loudly, gripping the flying sword tightly in both hands, and fiercely slashed towards the Wudao cultivator from top to bottom. Upon seeing this, the Wudao cultivator gritted his teeth without hesitation to confront the enemy, lifted his momentum, and attempted to intercept Chai Chang's flying sword. A crisp snap sounded, and Chai Chang's flying sword broke into two sections on the black sword. Liu Yun looked at the scene before him, feeling puzzled and unsure of why Chai Chang was acting in such a way. Just as he was puzzled, the black sword also fell to the ground with a tremendous force. And the Wudao cultivator's already pale face turned even paler, followed by a mouthful of blood spurting out. Before the Wudao cultivator could pick up the Wudao from the ground, the tip of the broken flying sword was piercing towards him like lightning. At this point, the Wudao cultivator had no mana left and was unable to dodge the piercing flying sword. Watching the tip of the sword approach his neck, the Wudao cultivator let out a miserable smile, closed his eyes tightly, as if he had accepted fate's arrangement. However, at this critical moment, Chai Chang suddenly withdrew half of his flying sword. The Wudao cultivator opened his eyes and looked at Chai Chang in surprise. A hint of sympathy flashed in Chai Chang's eyes, but he knew that the battle was not over yet and he couldn't soften his heart. The Wudao cultivator felt an unprecedented fear, but he also knew that at this moment, only with hard work can there be a glimmer of vitality. As Chai Chang raised his half-flying sword again, the Wudao cultivator gritted his teeth and perked up, a more intense confrontation was about to unfold. Liu Yun, on the other hand, silently observed from a distance, feeling moved by the struggle of the two cultivators. He knew that this battle would determine the fate of the two and also affect their future here. However, he also understood that regardless of the outcome, he would take this battle as a lesson, constantly cultivate and strive to reach the peak as soon as possible. The final result was that Chai Chang's half-flying sword blade stopped at the neck of the Wudao cultivator, and had already cut through his skin and oozed blood. The ranking battle of the lowest level in the ethereal courtyard has been settled, and Liu Yun and Xiaobizi have both achieved their expected rankings with satisfaction. After a day of rest, the disciples have regained their fighting spirit. They faced a new challenge. The impact of the top 10 in the lower tier to the higher tier. This competition is not only to prove one's strength, but also to realize one's dreams and embark on a higher path of cultivation. Liu Yun and Xiaobizi watched this challenge together. Their eyes were filled with anticipation and admiration. 10 people, including Chai Chang and Liu Bojiang, demonstrated extraordinary strength and resilient fighting spirit in this challenge. Their performance deeply shocked Liu Yun. Especially Liu Bojiang, he defeated a cultivator with 5 levels of qi refining in the competition. This is not only a victory, but also a manifestation of his firm belief. In the future matches, Liu Yun did not go to watch again, and any outcome had nothing to do with him. But later on, it was learned that Liu Bojiang joined the Xianjian sect in the same year as him, but in terms of cultivation, he had fallen far behind Liu Bojiang. According to the ranking of the competition, both Liu Yun and Xiaobizi were fortunate enough to receive the reward for this small competition. Liu Yun has contributed 600 points and also has 600 inferior spirit stones, which is undoubtedly a huge wealth for him. Liu Yunxin kept his promise to Xiaobizi and gave him 600 points of contribution. Although this made him feel waves of flesh pain, seeing Xiaobizi's ecstatic expression, Liu Yun could only helplessly twitch his cheeks. In this way, his contribution to the sect has been exhausted. Fortunately, there are still 600 lower-grade spirit stones left, at least he has not achieved nothing. He needs to start accumulating his contribution again, and this time, he has decided to use his resources more wisely, no longer using them all at once. The current task is to first stabilize the cultivation of the 3 layers of qi refining, and then cultivate the divine sting in the spirit nourishing technique, which can have unexpected effects on enemies. Before practicing, Liu Yun took on another cleaning task. The body technique passed to him by the old sweeper was very unique, and the improvement of his realm was more effective than dodging and attacking in combat. Every day of cleaning, Liu Yun still uses the body techniques taught by the old sweeper to clean, comprehending the mysteries and treating it as a form of cultivation. After cleaning, Liu Yun returned to the cave to practice the divine sting. Divine sting is the process of condensing one's divine sense into a thin spike, which attacks the opponent's sea of consciousness when facing enemies. It can cause short-term damage to the opponent, but if the opponent's divine sense is strong, this attack is ineffective, but it can still have an unexpected sneak attack effect. In terms of realm, Liu Yun does not need to practice deliberately. He found that as long as he uses the wonderful body techniques taught by the old man who sweeps the floor every day, his meridians expand rapidly and his speed of absorbing spiritual energy also increases rapidly. Nurturing the spirit technique is a daily skill that Liu Yun must practice. Although the speed of increasing his spiritual consciousness is not very fast, over time, his spiritual consciousness can be comparable to that of a 5th-level cultivator in qi refining. This fully demonstrates the importance and practicality of the technique of nourishing the mind. For Liu Yun, the technique of nourishing the mind is definitely an indispensable skill. In addition to the daily required spiritual cultivation technique, Liu Yun has already cultivated the divine sting to the level of great perfection, which further proves his talent and strength in divine consciousness. However, the number of uses of the divine sting is limited, and after more than 3 times, the divine consciousness will dry up and it will take a day to recover. This reminds Liu Yun to be cautious when using divine consciousness and not to excessively consume it. Although the technique of nourishing the mind belongs to a relatively lower level of spiritual consciousness and can only be considered as an introductory technique of spiritual consciousness, it is still of great help to oneself. Overall, the technique of nourishing the mind is a very valuable skill. For Liu Yun, it is definitely a wise choice to cultivate the technique seriously and improve his spiritual consciousness. Liu Yun's situation is somewhat difficult now. His sect contribution has been exhausted and he cannot exchange it for other martial arts. However, he did not give up because of this, but chose to cultivate the 9 heavens of quenching body technique. Liu Yun took out the jade slip of the quenched body 9 heavens technique from his storage bag and began silently practicing. Quenching the body, as the name suggests, is to cultivate the body, gradually making it hard like a rock, strengthening from the outside to the inside. During the process of cultivating the first layer of the first layer, Liu Yun discovered that quenching the skin not only requires cultivation, but also requires the use of dozens of spiritual medicines to soak and refine the body. Originally, practicing body refining techniques also requires the supply of spirit stones. Liu Yun sighed. He understood that this was a necessity for cultivation, although somewhat helpless, he must also accept this reality. There are many types of medicinal herbs needed for refining the body, ranging from ordinary to precious, with no less than 1,000 varieties. He knew that precious medicinal herbs could not be obtained by himself, and even ordinary herbs could not be gathered together in a short period of time. The only spiritual stones that can be obtained now are the 600 lower-grade spiritual stones that were just rewarded, which is just a drop in the bucket for purchasing all the medicinal herbs needed for refining. He knew that in order to purchase all the necessary body refining elixirs, he had to discuss with Xiaobizi. Xiaobizi has lived here since childhood, and no one is more familiar with the situation here than him. Outside the Xiaobizi cave, Liu Yun transmitted a message to the inside, but after a long time, there was no movement. Liu Yun thought he was going to play again, but he didn't care and planned to come find him again tomorrow. But there was no sign of Xiaobizi for several days in a row, and Liu Yun couldn't help but become anxious. You should know that Xiaobizi usually plays in the sect, and even if he wants to go out, he will send himself a message through the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com. But this time, he disappeared without a trace. Helpless, Liu Yun sent a transmission note to Xiaobizi, and soon there was a message from Xiaobizi in Liu Yun's transmission jade slip. I'm refining tools at the old man's place. Refining tools. Liu Yun's first reaction when he saw this message was to rub his eyes, thinking he was mistaken. He couldn't believe it was actually sent by Xiaobizi. With Xiaobizi's troublesome personality, would he go to refine tools? In order to verify the authenticity of the information, Liu Yun quickly tidied up and ran towards Zhang Bo's cave. When he arrived at Zhang Bo's cave, he saw Xiaobizi standing there, holding an ordinary magical tool embryo in his hand. His small face was made dirty, which made him laugh at him. Oh, our brave, handsome and great sword cultivator by Hongwu, what's wrong with his appearance? Liu Yun couldn't help but tease Xiaobizi. How dare you joke at me? It's not all because of you. After hearing this, Liu Yun was taken aback and asked somewhat puzzled, because of me? What's going on? Do you know who Zhang Bo is? He's an 8th level alchemist. You think it's so easy to ask him to help refine weapons, and he'll give you and Monkey Stitch 2 free crafting, all of which are conditional. Xiaobizi looked like you still don't understand. What conditions? Liu Yun asked. Alas, I haven't become his disciple for free refining. Xiaobizi looked aggrieved. I'll go talk to Zhang Bo and write a note. If it doesn't work out, I'll return the spirit stone to him in the future. If it doesn't work out, then I'll replace you and work for him, Liu Yun said regretfully. A hint of strangeness flashed in Xiaobizi's eyes. He knew that Liu Yun had really been deceived by him.